Chapter 41. Molly vs Ace. Molly has been very comfortable in recent days, the naval base has been built, and the development of the hot spring hotel has also been completed with the help of Jimmy Fruit's ability. Molly eats, sleeps, walks Kumik every day, and then goes to the hot spring in the evening. Sanchin and Jimmy quarreled when they were okay, quarreled when they were okay, and quarreled when they were okay. It doesn't matter to Limo, he can make noise if he likes it. Anyway, it's fine if it doesn't make me sleep. If you look around, Kumik is much better. Kumik can now speak 3 words. Komi tilde chi. Molly sneered at this, even if you can turn the sky, you are my pet. Colonel Molly, I'm on a sea patrol mission. In Molly's office, Johnson said with a slightly bitter expression. Because cruising the sea area is Molly's task, he has to cruise twice a month. Molly has always turned a deaf ear to this kind of thing. Anyone who likes to go will go, and if they don't, I have opened a branch in the mountains. Still want to command me? Dream. Oh, let's go, Da Cheng, bring the phone bug. If something happens, just call back. Limo said lightly. Johnson was instantly moved. It turned out that Colonel Molly was still worried about me, so he asked me to bring a phone bug and contact him in time if it was in danger. With a solemn expression on his back, Johnson said loudly, yes. Colonel Molly, I will do a good job of patrolling the sea. Limo waved his hand slightly, and Johnson turned around and walked out of the office, heading to the port for a cruise. Sanchin put down the book and said strangely, if you are far away, even you can't help right away. Limo was stunned. Rescue? What kind of rescue? Sanchin said, you asked him to take the phone bug because he was in danger and reported to you in time. Would you like to save him? Molly pouted. Don't talk about it. If he is far away, how can I save him? When I arrive, he will be hardened. Sanchin said in surprise. Then you asked him to contact you with a phone bug. Report a location, so it is convenient to collect the corpse. 3000 heard the words and silently looked out the window to the port, where Johnson was giving a passionate speech to mobilize morale. Sanchin shook his head and said in his heart, Dakyung, don't go too far, otherwise it will be really cold. Limo smiled, this silly girl, the branch patrol is just a bit bigger, where can you go? Looking at the time, Limo said, let's go to the pub for a drink, and then take a dip in the hot spring. Sanchin shrugged and followed Molly to the tavern. On the north shore of Benos Island, a small boat was sent to the beach by the waves. The 2 people on the boat were like haggards, their eyes were sunken, and their eyes were glowing with green light. At first glance, they knew that the 2 had been hungry for a long time. Deus, there should be a place to eat here, Ace said weakly, lying on the bow. Deus lifted his eyelids. This is the north shore of the island, and the villages and towns are generally on the south shore. Come on, let's go over. Where's the ship? Leave it here first, and come back to get it when you're full. Afterwards, Ace and Deus took one step at a time, walking along the beach and walking towards Benos town with the afterglow of the setting sun. Molly brought 3000 to the only tavern in the town. Mr. Molly is here. The boss is Nodo, a bearded man. He was very happy to see Molly coming. Not only building a naval base to protect the town, but also developing a hot spring hotel, which also made them a lot of money. The merchant ship passengers in the past are also willing to stop and soak in the hot springs. Yeah, bearded boss, have 2 glasses of wine first. Lee and Sanchin sat directly at the bar. Limo looked around and said, Boss bearded, business is good. Nodo didn't care that Molly called him a bearded man. Now everyone knew that Molly would only remember people in his own way. He put 2 glasses of wine in front of Molly and Sanchian, and said with a smile, thanks to Mr. Molly's development of the hot spring hotel, there are more customers coming and going, and the birthday wine is much better. Limo shrugged and took a sip from the glass. To be honest, he developed the hot springs for his own enjoyment. As for the rest, he didn't care. Jingle bells. As the doorbell rang, 2 men like hungry tigers walked in, it was Ace and Deus. Boss. Rice. Meat. Wine. The two were lying on the edge of the bar, sitting beside Molly. Noto responded, turned around and entered the kitchen, and soon brought out 2 large plates of seafood fried rice, a large plate of pork chops, and 2 glasses of wine. The two looked at the food, their eyes were green, like a hungry tiger rushing to eat, their heads were buried in the fried rice, and they were frantically eating. Ace took 2 or 3 pieces of pork chop, turned his head to look at Molly, and swept his eyes to the cloak of justice behind Molly. Ace raised his eyebrows. Navy. Sanchin looked at the two of them with an uncomfortable expression, and whispered to Molly, how come the two of them haven't eaten in their entire lives, as for how hungry they are? Sanchin didn't get a response from Molly. She raised her head to look at Molly's face, only to see Molly looking at the 2 people who were madly cooking, with a solemn expression, as if he was facing a great enemy. 3001 was startled, and Molly showed such an expression. Could it be that these 2 people are very strong? Does Molly need to be treated with caution? Suddenly, I heard Molly's voice beside my ears. Boss, bring me the same food as the 2 of them. In an instant, Xiao Lian collapsed. It turned out that he saw that others were eating a lot, so he wanted to compete with them. Molly shook his head, unbuttoned his suit jacket, and prepared for battle. These 2 seem to be able to eat well. Are they deliberately hungry for days to challenge me? Yes, it must be, otherwise why would he sit next to me and raise his eyebrows provocatively at me? Mr. Molly, this is... As soon as the boss brought the meal, Li Qian took a spoon and started eating. While eating, he glanced at Ace and the others from the corner of his eye. Ace and the others ate first, so they were finished quickly. Boss, 2 more. Ace shouted excitedly with food in his stomach, asking for more food. At the same time, Ace also looked at the Navy who was taller than himself and had a knife on his waist, who was eating the same food as himself, and glanced at himself from time to time. Ace was taken aback. Is he going to compete with me for dinner? 1 more. Molly also finished eating, pushing the plate. Yu Guang glanced at Ace beside him, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Lao Su is the latecomer. Ah, there is wood. Ace grinned. Funny. The boss brought Ace and the others up first. Deus started to eat, but Ace didn't move, as if he was waiting for a man to eat together. Before the game, everyone had to stand on the starting line. Noto put the food in front of Li Qian. Limo and Ace picked up the spoons at the same time, and there seemed to be sparks in their eyes. Began to eat. The 2 start eating at the same time. Finished fried rice. Eat pork chops at the same time. Finished. Drink at the same time. Kill it in one go. Boss. 1 more. The 2 shouted in unison. Chapter 42. ASC. Ah tilde so comfortable. Ace groaned as he soaked in the hot spring. That's right. This is a natural hot spring at the foot of the volcano. Molly put a towel on his head and soaked his entire body in the hot spring water. By the way, I don't know your name yet. Ace asked. Molly squinted and said casually, my name is Molly, and I'm a Navy. Hello, Mr. Lee, my name is Ace, I'm a pirate. Ace asked politely. Deuce looked at the 2 of them dully, greeted each other, and took a hot spring together. Is this really okay? Deuce looked at Molly nervously. He was a Navy. Ah tilde it's so comfortable. After a while, the 2 sighed at the same time. Xiao, why do you fall asleep even after eating? I was eating at the pub just now, and halfway through eating, Ace suddenly buried his head in the fried rice. Everyone was startled, thinking he was dead, and fell asleep after a long time. Ace scratched his head and said embarrassedly, I don't know, maybe I fell asleep when I was tired from eating. Limo nodded when he heard the words, sometimes eating is quite tiring. By the way, Mr. Molly, you are the Navy, we are pirates, won't you arrest us? As soon as Ace said this, Deus's muscles tightened instantly. You, a guy with a lack of brains, don't even mention it, and you still take the initiative to ask. Deus was already prepared. As long as Li Qi made his move, he would immediately drag Ace away. However, Molly's answer made Deuce almost plunge his head into the water. Limo waved his hands indifferently. It's off-duty time now, so I won't talk about work. Hey, Ace and Deus looked at each other in shock. Does he consider the Navy to work? Mr. Molly is at work. Deuce asked in surprise. Yeah, what else can I do if I don't go to work? I also need to make money. Molly felt that these two people seemed to be a little sick. Could it be that the brains of being a pirate are not good? It's hard to be a pirate, either robbing houses all day long or exploring treasure hunts. After all, isn't it for money? Why can't I find a good class? Ace was stunned for a moment. Carp's teaching impressed him deeply. Isn't being a Navy just for justice and catching pirates? Is it not for justice? Limo glanced at Ace and smiled. Who is justice? Me. He shook his head and said, maybe in your position, you are just right. In short, don't be so serious. There are good people and bad people everywhere. I don't care if you are a pirate or not. In short, don't bully the common people in the future, you know. When Ace heard this, he bared his teeth and said with a smile, don't worry, Mr. Lee, I'm not a pirate for so-called treasure. Molly pouted, but did not speak. After a moment of silence, Ace looked up at the little starry sky with memories flashing in his eyes. Me and my two younger brothers, we made an appointment to become one piece. Deus looked at Ace. He had heard about it before. He had two younger brothers. Brother? Deuce asked. Ace smiled and didn't answer directly, but was a little lonely and low. Drinking wine. You are a real brother. Deus is a careful person. Seeing Ace talking about his younger brother, his mood changed, and he pursed his lips and stopped talking. Molly tore off the towel covering his head, twisted his neck and said, it's good to have a younger brother. When my elder brother protects my younger brother, I feel more entangled in my heart. When Ace heard this, he gritted his teeth. His expression was extremely painful, and his eyes were full of sadness. Long time. Looking at the starry sky, Limo turned Ace's body, pointed to the tattoo on Ace's arm, and said softly, protect it well. Ace lowered his eyebrows and looked at the tattoo on his left arm. ASC. The S representing sob is marked within times. Molly got up and left. She walked to the door curtain and left the sentence without looking back. Stay here tonight and leave early tomorrow because I have to go to work tomorrow. Ace stared blankly at Molly's departure, turned his head and smiled at Deus. Mr. Molly is also a gentle person. Early the next morning, Ace and the others used the treasure spit out by the giant bird at that time to exchange money in the town and buy a lot of supplies. Looking back at the blue and white naval base, Ace smiled, turned and ran back to his charger with Deus. As for Ace, Limo didn't pay too much attention to him. A rash young man may have a chance to meet again in the future, maybe he is just an interesting passerby. Molly enjoys his current life very much. During this period, Huang Yuan called several times to transfer Molly back to the Navy headquarters, and the transfer order came a few times. He was either torn by Molly or ignored. He had already forgotten that he was a colonel of the Navy headquarters. In the words of Li Qiye, the boss of my branch company was doing well, so why did he have to go back to the head office to suffer and suffer? Time flies by in a hurry. In more than 2 years, Sanchin and Jimmy will be noisy in the market, but they are not tit-for-tat like before. Kumik will also speak in a simple manner, and the blood-hot Johnson has also been promoted to captain, and Li Qiye has been promoted to captain. But it's even more lazy, and now even Kumik doesn't walk. Hey, let me tell you, why don't you go out to the sea to have a look anyway? You're not afraid of getting sick if you stay in the office all day. Sanchin said to Li, who was lying on the sofa in a daze. What are you doing out? Isn't this good? There are food, drink, and hot springs. Li Qian glanced at San Qian who was sitting at the desk. Sanchin took a wanted notice with a reward of 550 million and dumped it. This guy is now the captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates. Who is he? Moli glanced at the wanted notice and scratched his head. Ace, Sanchin shouted. Who is Ace? Sanchin sighed. Freckle face, Xiao Ai. In Moli's mind, a polite young man with freckles on both sides of his cheeks gradually became clear. Ah. It's him. He's worth 500 million. Yes, he shied away from Chihuahui's invitation and went to the Whitebeard pirates. I heard that Whitebeard valued him very much. You don't know it yet, we'll talk about it later. Ah, okay. Li Qiye nodded helplessly, but he was thinking that Sanchin was getting more and more unruly, always taking care of himself. In the room, after a brief silence, Sanchin said with some worry, Moli, this is not a problem. Lao Sa has been looking for you many times, and there have been several dispatch orders from the headquarters, but we always refuse. If you do, I'm afraid it will be difficult for Lao Sa to do it. Hey, Moli was also a little troubled. Also, he has been here for 3 years, and the branch company has no performance at all. What if it is withdrawn one day? The current comfortable days were earned by a pirate when I cut it myself. Would you like to cut 10 more? Moli smacked his lips and said, 3,000, what do you say? Sanchin thought for a while, and said, the last order was half a year ago. I asked you to go to Rog Town and wait for the conscription ship to return to the headquarters. It will be handed over to Johnson for the time being. Anyway, there is no new transfer order, so let's go to Rog first. Find Smoker. Limo was silent for a while, then sat up from the sofa and looked at San Qian. Who is Smoker? Chapter 43. Enjoy the peace of this moment. Port of Rogue Town. Colonel Lee, we will always remember you. Johnson and a group of sailors who sent Limo to Rogue Town burst into tears. Johnson clung to Moli's hands tightly, tears streaming down his face. Oh my God, the fortress of Benos Island is finally his retirement home. The hands-off shopkeeper is finally gone. Da Chang, I will never forget you. Limo pursed his lips, stared at Johnson, and said seriously. Sanchin curled his lips in disdain. After 3 days, you can still remember Johnson, mother and your surname. Limo added, I'm just going out for a walk, and I'll be back after a while. You should take a good look at your house. When Johnson heard this, he cried even harder. Could it be that I can't even be the head of the small base in the East China Sea? After sending Johnson away, Moli was a little disappointed. What a good person. They were reluctant to leave the moment I left. It is indeed a subordinate that I personally brought by Limo. Rog Town was supposed to be under the jurisdiction of a branch in the East China Sea. Ever since Smog was dispatched here, Rog Town has become a naval base under Smog's governance. The branch minister disagrees. I'm sorry, I'm the most arrogant Smog in the world. He didn't even listen to the words of the warring states marshal. And would you be the head of the East China Sea branch? The East China Sea has always been the weakest sea. But this weakest sea is very magical, the naval hero in One Piece and the leader of the Revolutionary Army, the dragon. It's all from here. And Garp, the old street guy, came back to pull weeds and shovel the road when he had nothing to do. These brothers who haven't left the novice village yet, just single-played the full-level boss. Inside a smoky office at the naval base, a Navy was reporting to a cloud of white smoke behind a newspaper. Colonel Smog, commander of the base on Benos Island, and Colonel Lieutenant Lee has come to Rogue Town. Huh, what is he doing here? Behind the newspaper, Smoker's impatient voice sounded. Smoker stood up, pushed open the window, and the breeze came in, and the smoke in the house gradually dissipated. Smoker was smoking 2 cigars and looked out the window with a displeased face. The justice cloak was gently swayed, and Li Qiye was wearing a fitted white formal suit, with his left hand resting on the handle of the knife, looking very lazy. The 3,000 next to him, whom Smog also knew, was a black lady in formal attire, carrying a small bag cross-body, like waterfall silver hair reaching her waist. There is also a woman in formal clothes. Although her appearance is slightly inferior to that of Sanchin, her figure is extremely hot, holding the cute kumik in her right hand. Smog was a little puzzled, is Lee Mo, bringing his family to Rogue Town for a tour. In the office, Smaller looked at Mo Lee, who was dragging his family with him. What are you doing here? The base commander shouldn't be able to play casually, right? I came here by order from the Navy headquarters. Mo Lee leaned on the sofa and said weakly. There are some differences between Smog. He knew that Lee Kie was directly under the command of General Kasaragi, but for 3 years in the East China Sea, his only achievement was to develop the hot spring industry on Benos Island. As for the pirates, he also caught one. I thought you had been forgotten. That's the best. Mo Lee was expressionless, even a little happy inside. Just in time to mess around. Better to live to death on Benos. Smog looked at Mo Lee in surprise. There were a lot of lazy people in the Navy. Even his friend and boss, Ouchie, was synonymous with laziness, but he didn't always live in obscurity on a small island. Smoker shook his head. The root. Smaller threw a cigar at Mo Lee. Mo Lee licked his lips. He wanted to smoke for a long time, but he never found a suitable reason. The beautiful young man who didn't usually smoke suddenly appeared around everyone with a cigarette in his mouth, as if he was still a little embarrassed. Just as Smog handed it over, Mo Lee also pushed the boat and tried it out. Sanchin stood aside, frowning just as he was about to stop it. He saw Jimmy take 2 steps forward. Mo Lee, I'll order it for you. Carden. A delicate lighter was in Jimmy's hand, and he ironed the cigar and lit it in his mouth. Ha. Jimmy exhaled and said in admiration, it's a good guy. As he spoke, he handed the lit cigar to Lee Kie. Ah, thank you. Lee Mo was completely blinded by Jimmy's actions, and took the cigarette in a daze. Witnessing the whole process of 3,000, 2 flames instantly burst into flames in her beautiful eyes. You stinky mother-in-law, big wave girl. Sancheni pulled Jimmy's collar and threw it out the window, then jumped out himself. Then I heard the sound of a loud fight from downstairs. You big girl, give me death. Hee hee, are you talking about me? Little scumbag. Ah, armed. Humph, Liu. Smog twitched half of his face and said, your 2 subordinates are quite good. Ha ha, Mo Lee smiled awkwardly, low key. Boom. Bang. Boom. Hey, Mo Lee, aren't you going to take care of it? Smog, who couldn't bear it, roared. Whoosh. Taking a breath, Lee Kie raised his index finger and shook it. Shish. Listen, there's a 0.43 second pause in their fight. Let's feel the piece that belongs to this one, okay? Whoosh. You don't care. I'll take care of it. Smog's forehead burst with blue veins. Bang. He kicked over the desk with 1 foot and was about to rush downstairs. A Navy rushed in a panic, saluting and reporting, Colonel Smog. The big thing is bad, the Straw Hat Pirates have landed in Rogue Town. Who is the Straw Hat? Smoker asked. The big pirate with a bounty of 30 million. Smog became even more angry when he heard the words, and a lot of white eyes popped out of his body. Only 30 million, he also deserves a big pirate. The sailor's face was solemn. Colonel Smoker, he defeated the Crick Pirates and the Murloc Dragon. Crick. Lee Kie was stunned for a moment. Why did he miss Oreo? A little bit. Huh. Smog took a deep breath. The mere pirates make you so nervous. Attack. Arrest the Straw Hat Boy. Yes. The sailor was startled by Smoker and ran away. Hey, do you want to go? Smoog turned his head and asked Mo Lee. Mo Lee, who was learning to smoke, lay comfortably on the sofa and waved his hand lightly. Humph. Lazy fellow. Smoker was about to leave the office when he heard downstairs. Boom. You let them catch the pirates. You bastard. Smog yelled at Lee Kie again. Mo Lee took out his ears, walked to the window reluctantly, and shouted to the 2 masters of body strokes downstairs. Don't fucking demolish the house, go help the master's house catch the pirates. Smoker left, and there was no more fighting downstairs. He should have followed to catch the pirates. Mo Lee was left in the office smoking a cigar. Kumik looked curiously at Li Kie smoking a cigar. Kumi tilde tilde. Huh. Limo looked at Kumik and smiled. Children don't like smoking. After finishing speaking, Molly looked out the window. With Molly's current perspective and height, he could just see the high execution platform on the square. Chapter 44. What are you going to do to my colleague? It's really strange weather. The weather was fine just now. Why is it going to rain suddenly? Molly murmured while holding a cigar and looking at the dark clouds outside the window. Molly turned his eyes to watch, and suddenly saw a man with a straw hat standing on the high execution platform outside the window. The distance was relatively far, and the weather was gloomy, and Molly couldn't see his face. As this standing tall and seeing far, Limo looked at the man on the execution platform strangely. Suddenly, a man surrounded by blue and white plaids locked the guy with the straw hat on the execution platform with a splint. Then a man jumped onto the execution platform. Huh, red nose, Molly said in surprise. Can humans have such a big red nose? How much the fuck does this have to drink? Is this to be punished? Molly walked slowly to the window, quietly watching the red-nosed man standing on the execution platform, holding a long knife and laughing wildly. Not long after, the pirates danced wildly with their swords under the execution stand, looking extremely excited. I want to be the man to be the pirate king. The man who was under the torture clip. A cry resounded in the sky above the entire Rog town. Everyone in the square was silent at this moment, and the needles could be heard falling. This man who carried all the pirates to implement the ideal of life, on the execution platform, saw only life and death, and even laughed. This man is quite bold. Limo looked at Luffy's smile before he died. The great terror between life and death, face it calmly, be a man of open heart and face with a smile, a hero. Anyway. Who is One Piece? Why be her man? Molly was very puzzled. Could it be that One Piece is a beautiful woman? Just when Molly's train of thought went astray, Bucky's long knife had already fallen. Everyone in Rogue Town is witnessing the execution and the farce of the two pirates. In the sky, the thunderclouds squeezed each other, and the electric snake huffed. A strong light and lightning descended from the sky and landed straight on the execution platform. Boom! The entire town of Rog was shrouded in a huge thundercloud, and the lightning rumbled violently. After the thunder, the execution platform collapsed suddenly, and the huge force of the thunder and lightning caused the execution platform to ignite a blue flame. Ahahaha, I'm still alive, I earned it. Luffy held his straw hat and laughed, and everyone in the square opened their mouths, unable to believe the scene in front of them. Catch them! Smoker raised Halushi's 10 hands high. From all directions, the Navy poured out of the alley, and wanted to surround all the pirates in the square. Molly stood by the window, his eyes drifted to a man standing on the roof in the distance. He was tall, and his whole body was shrouded in a cloak. What an interesting ability. Molly flicked the ashtray and picked up the saber that had been unsheathed for 3 years. He touched Kumich's watermelon head. Wait here obediently. At this time, the town of Rog, whether it was on the streets or in the square, was full of chaos. Bucky and others were arrested by Smog, and the Straw Hats fled. Smoker is chasing Luffy the Straw Hat. Molly just went downstairs and walked to the edge of the square, when a huge wind suddenly blew up, and countless people in the square were blown away by the wind. Whether it was the Navy, pirates, or civilians, they were all injured to varying degrees. The strong winds knocked over many roofs and many buildings collapsed. Limo stood in the wind, the cloak of justice behind him rattled. He quietly looked at the town of Rog, which was swept by the strong wind. Click! A flash of lightning and thunder briefly illuminated the dark town of Rog. Is it too much? Molly's expression became less scattered and more cold. Suddenly a sailor flew over, and Lily reached out to catch it. The frightened sailor swallowed. Thank you, Colonel Molly. Limo nodded and said softly, don't worry about the pirates for now, notify the entire Navy to rescue the disaster and rescue the civilians. But. Go. Li Qia's calm voice carried an unquestionable gesture. Ming, I understand. The Navy only felt his heart tremble, and under Li Qia's calm eyes, there was a monstrous anger hidden in the sky. What is this for? Isn't it a bit too presumptuous? Li Qia disappeared before he finished speaking. Brothers, take advantage of the chaos, let's grab. In a small alley, a pirate was yelling at the rest of the pirates, trying to rob civilians in the chaos, when suddenly the breeze blew, and the corpse was divided into two parts. Molly stood at the entrance of the alley and didn't even look at the dozen or so decapitated pirates in the alley. Pickled and popped the skin, it's not a pity to die. Huh, where is it? Li Mo turned around and walked towards the other alley. On the street leading directly to the port, Smoker had already subdued Luffy, and a large amount of white smoke wrapped Luffy. Just about to reach for 10 hands. Crack. The man whose whole body was shrouded under the cloak grabbed Smoker's 10 hands. The wind and rain were harsh, and there was a flash of lightning. It was a man with a checkered pattern on half of his face. Dragon. Smaller squinted at the man behind him who organized his own hands. Long smiled and said nothing. Sudden. Carden. A snow-white blade rests on the dragon's neck. I said, what are you going to do to my colleague? Molly was holding a wet cigar and stood beside the dragon, holding a knife on the dragon's neck with a displeased expression. Molly. Smog was speechless in surprise. When did he come? Why didn't he find it, as if he suddenly appeared here? Li Qia ignored Smoker's surprise and said to Long, you made a mess in Rog Town. Really, I'm really sorry. Long didn't care about the blade on his shoulder at all, his eyes were all on Luffy, and his face was unapologetic. Li Mo raised his brows. Hey. Uncle, did I say you are too arrogant? Pure killing intent. Long grinned and let go of 10 hands at the same time. His fingers moved slightly, and a gust of wind hit Luffy and blew Luffy out. Smog looked back at Long and then at Molly, his brows furrowed. The dragon was extremely calm. He said, I feel your killing intent, although there is only a trace of it, but it is extremely pure. Are you going to start here? Molly's expression moved slightly, the blade slowly moved away, and the blade stood still. Long looked back at Molly and smiled. Then disappeared in place. Why not arrest him? Smog looked at Li Mo angrily. Li Mo looked at the town of Rog, which had been ravaged by violent storms, and said, it's nothing to me to arrest him and kill him, but the civilians and the Navy here will all be affected. Smog looked at Molly, exhaled a large puff of smoke, and his face was gloomy and uncertain. No, it's not good, Colonel Smalls. A sailor came running from a distance and shouted in panic. Smoker's eyes widened angrily. What's going on? Hi, the pirates broke free, and there was a riot. Don't hurry, organize troops to encircle and suppress. Smog roared through gritted teeth. In the square at this time, the two women had already caught all the pirates. The earth became twisted, and the wave-shaped earth pressed the pirates to the ground. Chapter 45. The Pretentious Hypocritical Savior. Standing on the edge of the square, Li Qia and Smaller watched the Navy handcuff the pirates one by one. Molly took out a cigar from Smog's body, ignoring Smog's face as black as the bottom of a pot, and lit it on his own. Who is he? Molly asked after exhaling a breath of smoke. Who are you asking? Smoker asked, turning his head. The man with the soul print on his face. They are the Revolutionary Army. Smoker said solemnly. Molly was stunned for a while when he heard the words, then pointed at the broken walls in Rog Town and sneered, ignore the revolution of the common people. Even if you are full of anger, and you are dissatisfied with the upper-level rule, it is normal to resist, but since you call yourself a revolution, you have to look like it. Humph. A group of hypocritical saviors who have some power and are pretentious. Molly left after speaking, leaving behind Smog who was stunned in place. Smog looked at Molly's figure walking away, his eyes flickering. 3000, call Lao Sa, I'm going to the headquarters. Molly looked at the distance, pinched the arrogant 3000, and shouted at the top of his voice. Hey, got it. Blue blue, blue blue. Kacha. Mosamoxi. It turns out that my subordinates still remember me. Kizaru still pretended to be making a fuss. Old Sa, I'm in Rog Town, how do I get to the headquarters? Lee asked. Yeah, what are you doing here at the headquarters? The yellow monkey on the other end of the phone said in surprise. Okay, then I'll go back to the base. Lee Kie is not used to the yellow monkey at all, so he is not the one who is used to children. Oh I remembered, the last order to transfer you back to the headquarters was half a year ago, right? Seeing that Mo Li didn't play cards according to the routine, Huang Yuan immediately changed. Hey, what's the matter? In the past 2 or 3 years, you almost annoyed me to death. It's nothing, I'll change you to a better place. Mo Li was suddenly unhappy. Binhua Island, I just finished the hot spring, you can change it. You didn't say that when you asked me to come to the East China Sea. Yo, don't get angry, little brother Mo Li. In short, change places, if you like it, where will you like it? When Huang Yuan's voice fell, Mo Li smacked his lips. He turned to look at Sanchin and Jimmy who were around him. The 2 women nodded in agreement. They've had enough of Beanos. Li Mo looked at Kumik again. Forget it, her opinion is not important, the pet follows the owner, what opinion does she express? Well then, should I go directly or go to the headquarters first? Li asked. You come to the headquarters first, and then go to the station. Oh, that's fine, Li Mo agreed, and then asked again, where am I going? Let's talk about it when you come. I haven't been able to contact you for a few years, and I've picked up some good places. Come and talk about it first. Kacha. Mo Li and Sanqian stared blankly at the phone bug that Huang Yuan hung up instantly. In such a hurry. Smog had already prepared the warship and was going to chase Luffy and the others. Seeing Mo Li came out, he immediately said, Mo Li, I'm going to hunt down the Straw Hat Boy, you. When Smog opened his mouth, Li Kie knew what he was going to fart, so he interrupted immediately, stop. I'm not going, I'm going to the headquarters. Humph, let's go. Smog sneered and left with Dusky and the Navy. Li Mo pursed his lips, only the fool is suffering and chasing after you on the streets of the sea. I go back to the headquarters comfortably, and then go to the paradise to guard the house, isn't it good? How much is your salary? So hard. Besides, you didn't even protect your own station, so go after a hammer pirate. Ill. Li Mo took 3,000, Jimmy and Kumik, and mobilized a cruise ship with 80 Navy personnel as standard, and walked slowly to the Navy headquarters. Marin Vando. In the past 2 years, the capital investment and vigorous construction have increased the number of navies a lot. In recent years, there are not a few Navy rising stars. As for the great swordsman in the Navy, as Mo Liwo stayed in the East China Sea for 3 years, gradually no one mentioned it. When Mo Li arrived at Kizaru's office, the yellow monkey was still trimming his nails there. The steaming tea was placed on the table. He raised his eyelids and said, "It's coming so fast." Mo Li threw the saber on the shelf, picked up the cigarette on Kizaru's table, pulled out the chair, and crossed Erlang's legs in a very unimpressive manner. Ignite. Kizaru put down his nail clippers and asked curiously, have you learned to smoke? Mo Li rolled his eyes. I learned from you. Huh, what's the matter? Huang Yuan glanced at Mo Li, who was unhappy. What's wrong? I am enjoying life, eating, sleeping, and hot springs. What a good day. I was disturbed every 3 days. Now it is better to go back to the headquarters. I still don't know what to do in the future. They said that they were stationed on a small island, but it's been more than half a month, and I haven't waited for a letter. Mo Li waved his hand and said, if it wasn't for the 3,000 talk, I wouldn't come. I'm afraid it's difficult for you, and you won't want to see me for the rest of your life. Huang Yuan smiled and said, it seems that I have to thank Sanchin well. Mo Li pouted and did not speak. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with Huang Yuan, Mo-li left, and before leaving, he took the box of cigarettes on the table of Huang Yuan away. After taking the old man's things, I will help the old man with errands. Huang Yuan looked at Mo-li, and said yin and yang strangely. Ha. Mo-li turned his head and sneered, and threw the cigarette case back on the table, using this to threaten brother. Brother will get used to you. What rotten cigarettes, I don't smoke anymore. Hey, Huang Yuan was stunned, can this guy still act like a normal person? Well, so, as long as you do this well, you can take a half-year vacation and rest in the headquarters, no one cares about you, how? This deal is not a loss. Huang Yuan said. Don't you think I'm on vacation now? Mo-li spread his hands. During the month that Mo-li was at the headquarters, apart from eating and drinking, he stayed at home, watching two women quarrel, and finally led Kumik to the port. But it's not free. I stay on such a small island where there is so much noise all day. Kizaru said with a smile. Limo's lifeline is very easy to handle, quiet and leisurely. Mo-li is the direct subordinate of the general. As long as the general does not arrange tasks, he does not have to assign tasks, so he has a lot of free time in Malinfando. What are you talking about first? Mo-li licked his lips. Mo-li, do you know Hades? Who? The yellow monkey was relieved immediately, and you will stay in the East China Sea with you. You don't care about anything, do you? Pluto is one of the 3 most dominant ancient weapons in the world. Legend has it that just one shot can destroy an island. Oh. Aren't you surprised? Kazuna asked strangely. Limo shook his head, it was just an island, and he could chop it up himself. What's so surprising? Well, forget it, you go to the 7 capitals of water first, find a navy named T-Pen, and escort a person to Judicial Island with him. It's that simple, Li Kie asked. It's that simple, Kizaru nodded. Okay, I'll take it, remember the half-year vacation. Li took the cigarette that was thrown away just now, turned around and left. Huang Yuan looked at Mo-li's figure, took a sip of tea, and chuckled lightly. Sanchin was waiting for Mo-li at the door. Now, no matter where Mo-li goes, Sanchin and Jimmy have to follow him. If he can't do it, let Kumik follow him. If he is allowed to wander around, God knows where he will go. Can we go? 3000 looked forward to it. He also doesn't like the Navy headquarters very much, especially Lieutenant General Crane's women's troops. Why are all their thighs so long? It's a fox army. Yes, for this mission, you can follow me. After finishing the mission, we will take a 2-year vacation. Limo said very calmly. Just the 2 of us? Sanchin asked in surprise. Mo-li rubbed Sanchin's little head and said with a smile, yes, just the 2 of us. Chapter 46, The Uneasy Kind Old Lady. Mo-li helplessly looked at the 3000 who were standing at the port of the 7 capitals of water, glaring at a warship. 3000, let's go, they are all gone. Limo said, pointing to a warship that was getting farther and farther on the sea. They. Sanchin clenched his fists and looked at the distant warship, his airway trembling. He turned his head and glared at Mo-li. Mo-li instantly turned into the expression of an old man in the subway looking at his phone. Who is she? Sanchin pointed at the warship and asked Mo-li. That's not a warship. You didn't come here on it. No. Seeing Mo-li's answer, Sanchin exploded instantly. He walked to Mo-li in a few steps, raised his head, stared at Mo-li's erratic eyes, and said word by word, I'm asking that uneasy and kind old lady. Who is she? Ah, who? Mo-li. Sanchin screamed while grabbing Mo-li's cloak. What if your girlfriend is jealous and unreasonable? What is the 3000 at this time, rational? Fuck it. There is no such word in my mother's dictionary. Oh, okay, isn't she a big sister in her 30s, what do you think you are? Limo explained with a wry smile. In your 30s, isn't that just right to your taste? Fuck, don't you fucking talk nonsense, be careful I'll sue you for slander. Mo-li's face immediately turned red, a little embarrassed. Humph. You dog man, you just like old women with long legs and black silk. You don't dare admit it. At this time, Sanchin was going crazy and lost his mind. I also blame Molly for this bitch. He doesn't drive a good warship, so he has to rub it. Who is not good for you to rub against? Tina's warship, 3,000 is enough for him to drink a pot of sour and vinegar. Molly looked at the unreasonable Sanchin, rubbed his ears, and pursed his mouth forcefully. He became impatient. Women are so troublesome. When she's good, she's a little fairy, and when she's bad, she really wants to take a knife. You, what's your expression on? Seeing Li Qian's impatient expression towards him, Sanchin finally couldn't hold back the tears in his eyes. Woo, woo. Hey, tilde. Li Mo looked at Sanqian, who was squatting at his feet, burying his head in his knees and crying. All his impatience, all emotions, and all explanations were swallowed at this moment. He crouched down and reached out to touch Sanqian's silver hair. Tilde, Sanchin snorted and shook off Molly's hand. Li Qiji sucked his teeth and Hanako, how can this be fixed? Uncles, if it's not soft, it's hard. Molly's cheeks flicked, and he directly hugged Princess 3000 horizontal waist. Ah, what are you doing? Sanchin was taken aback by Molly's actions. Don't do it, go for a walk in the city. Li Mo pouted. Poochie, you bastard. Seeing Molly's old arrogant look, Sanchin burst into tears. In fact, she knew that Molly didn't have so many fancy bowels. If he was that kind of person, he would have. It's just that she has a sense of crisis. The big girl Jimmy dangles in front of Molly all day long. Her words can still be seen by 3000. But other people, 3000 is really hard to watch. There are many temptations in the headquarters, and the road is bumpy. In the end, Molly took 3000, rented an Agara, and walked around the 7th of water for 2 laps, and finally coaxed 3000 with a blue bow head rope. Oh tilde, it's so soft tilde shui pork is really delicious. Molly was eating shui pork, and his whole body was paralyzed on the thin shoulders of the 3000 people in front of him. Sanchin stroked Molly's head and said softly, let's hurry up and find that Peng, finish the mission early, and take a vacation early. Li Mo sat up and pouted. No, I have to go to the food town for dinner later. Ah, food town. It's quite far from here. Sanchin said in surprise. How did this guy think it was one thing? It's far away, anyway, it's an escort mission, what can you do? Li said indifferently. Forget it, finish the task first, and then bring Kumik over to have fun. Sanchin said. Molly looked at the silver-haired loli sitting in front of him in surprise, and thought to himself, have you forgotten someone? However, Molly didn't dare to say more, he just coaxed him so well, and if he provokes him again, it's incredible. Well, let's do the task first. Molly nodded and added, call Lao Sa and ask him how to find tea. Yo tilde little brother Molly, have you arrived at the 7 water capitals? By the way, Tina's improved warship is very fast, it should be. Snapped. The phone bug was grabbed by Li Mo and thrown into the water. Oh shit, does this old Biden think I'm not busy enough? This has just been coaxed, and your words are completely useless. Seeing Sanchin's little face turning from sunny to cloudy, Molly hurriedly suggested, Sanchin, we haven't had a drink together for a long time, do you want to go to the pub for a drink? Hearing what Molly said, Sanchin thought about it, and it seemed like it was the same. It's been a long time since we had a drink together. I remember when we first met, these guys took them to the pub to drink spirits and eat unpalatable pizza. Recalling the past, Sanchin's face slowly eased, and the shriveled little mouth gradually evoked a smile. Looking at the various changes in Sanchin's face, and finally fixed on the sunny day, Molly secretly let out a sigh of relief, coaxing the woman, very tired. The two stopped and went into a bar. It should be because of the day. There were a few people who were probably carpenters or boatmen. In the bar, a stunned man with a bighorn hairstyle was silently wiping his wine glass. Torin, 2 glasses of wine. Molly drank 3,000 and sat on the bar. Molly was a little impatient. At this time, Li Qian was so full of anger that he couldn't get angry at San Qian. He could only spend a little bit of his anger in other places. The Tauren is the CP9 spy lurking in the 7 capitals of water. Bruno. Bruno ignored Molly's tone, but the identities of the 2 men in the Navy made him very concerned. He was silent for a while and said word by word, "Guest, please wait a moment." "Hey, his voice is so strange," Sanchin asked with interest. Molly pouted, "Tauren talk like this, what's so strange?" Sanchin nodded his head in disbelief. The Tauren was a bit powerful. After a while, Bruno stood opposite the 2 with 2 glasses of wine, put it in front of the 2, and wiped the glass for himself. After drinking a glass of wine, both of them were in a better mood and sat for a while. "Molly, let's go." Sanchin was a little sleepy. Today, he was crying, howling and shopping, and after drinking some wine, Sanchin felt a little sleepy. "Well, let's go, I'm already sleepy." Molly was also tired. If he was allowed to fight, he would be fine for a few days and nights, but today, coaxing 3,000 to go shopping with 3,000 is better than Molly. It was also dragged down by 3,000. Bruno watched the 2 walk out of the bar and turn to the back room of the bar. "The highest home hotel. Boss, come to a room," Li Mo said weakly. The innkeeper narrowed his eyes and smiled ambiguously. "Our newest viewing couple. Just come over there, hurry up, I'm sleepy to death." Listening to the boss, San Qian interrupted. The boss was stunned for a while. Good guy, he was in a hurry. He smiled all over his face. "Guest, please come with me. The most important function of this room is to avoid the arrival of the water gods." Chapter 47. Sea Animal RV. In a dark warehouse. The 2 navies left at dusk when they were sitting in your tavern. Khalifa asked, rolling her eyes gracefully. Bruno nodded. "Yes, 2 navy. Look at the attire. The man is the captain of the navy, and the woman should be his adjutant." "Could it be the navy responsible for the escort?" said Kaku, who was leaning on the pillar. "The above did not inform us in advance that in the escort team of the sea train, apart from our people, there should be only 1 navy colonel," Khalifa said. The warehouse was silent for a while. Khalifa looked at Lucci, who was holding her arms, the strongest CP9 in 800 years. She asked, "Do you need to contact the navy?" "No need, do our own tasks, the navy can do it themselves, anyway, we are enough." After Lucci finished speaking, he looked at the woman sitting next to him, shrouded in robes. "Nicole Robin, if you don't want your companion to die, please cooperate with us." Robin, whose whole body was shrouded in a large robe, whispered, "I see." For Robin at this time, resignation is her only choice. In the past 10 years, she has betrayed many pirate groups and organizations that gave her shelter, and those once shelters have also been destroyed one by one. Now she doesn't want to hide, maybe she's tired, and more importantly, she doesn't want her companions, the Straw Hats, to be implicated and die like the previous ones. Tonight will be chaos. Robin's betrayal. Frankie is kidnapped. Iceberg is attacked. Straw Hats first encounter CP9 Feet's defeat, and the gods of water attack. In the hotel, Li Qian was lying on the bed and sleeping, when San Qian, who was leaning on the big pink reclining chair, suddenly woke up. Molly, a government organization called CP9, attacked the owner of the shipyard. There was a fight, and a sea train came, and there were many people on the train. 3,000 pushes to wake up Molly. "Ah, Navy." Molly rubbed his sleepy eyes. "Also, are you so perverted? You know what happened on the island. Are you a surveillance?" Sanchin rolled his eyes and continued, "It seems that the Navy from the sea train is our colleague on this mission." Molly smacked his lips and turned over. "Don't worry about it. When they leave, we will go back to the headquarters and tell Lao Sa that we are late. It's okay, no one has been late for work and left early. There are a few black lines along the forehead of 3,000. If you really do this, there is no possibility that you will be sent out. You can only stay in the headquarters for the elderly." Follow me. Sanchin pulled Li Mo, who was sleeping. Why, it's all said. Go. Li Qian murmured impatiently, met Sanchin's firm eyes, and instantly persuaded. In the sea train, T-Pen was wondering, didn't he say that there were 2 navies who wanted to carry out the mission with him? What about people? So he went to the second carriage and found the CP9 crowd. Hello everyone, may I ask if you have seen 2 navies sent by the headquarters to carry out the mission? Colonel T-Pen asked. After a moment of silence, Bruno spoke. I know, haven't they come? Yes, that's why I came to ask, T-Pen said. Bruno turned to look at Lu Qi. Lu Qi glanced at Colonel T-Pen, silent for a moment, and said, Bruno will pick them up. Understood. Bruno nodded, then stretched out his hand and yanked in the air at will, and Bruno opened a door in the space. Navy, please wait a moment. The voice fell, and Bruno entered through the door and disappeared into the space of the door. Bruno of course knows where Mo Li and the others are. There is no doubt about the ability of CP9. It can be said that every person with status who enters this city will know something. But when Bruno appeared in Mo Li and San Qian's room, the room was empty, the sheets were messy, and nothing else. Bruno looked at the wide open window, he shook his head. Since he had left, there was no need to chase him. He turned and returned to the space door. I'm sorry, your colleague is no longer there, maybe he's coming. Bruno said to T-Pen. If that's the case, thank you for running. T-Pen thanked him and left. The pair of Mo Li and San Qian were blurry, and when they arrived at the station, the taillights of the sea train just disappeared into the waves. Look, are you late? Li Mo shrugged and said lightly. Sanchin helplessly looked at the distant sea train, and then looked at Mo Li, who had the words, I don't want to go, written all over his face, and smiled wryly while holding his forehead. What is this all about? Can Mo Li be able to do anything right? Let's go, I'm going back to sleep, it's too late, why should I force it? While Li Qian comforted San Qian, he secretly rejoiced that it was best to run away. Anyway, he didn't want to go. Hey, that's the only way to go, let's go. The two walked back slowly, but the waves were getting bigger and bigger, and the tide was spreading more and more fiercely. It seems that this is the water gods, that the innkeeper said. Sanchin looked at the monstrous waves and said, Water god. Li Mo nodded in agreement. Sanchin glanced at Mo Li and shook his head, it would be strange if he knew. Hey, 3000, what do you think that is? Mo Li pointed to a place in surprise. Huh. Sanchin looked over and saw 2 big fish like plesiosaurs, carrying a house and staying quietly in the sea. Hey, what is that? Sanchin was also stunned. Oh tilde. Mo Li slapped his fists and said immediately, I see, it's a marine animal RV. Really? Sanchin asked suspiciously. Trust me, let's go and see. Mo Li pulled 3000 and ran, and took a few steps to occupy the roof. Ow! The big yellow fish sensed something unusual and roared at the elder striped big fish next to him. Ow! When the 2 big fish were screaming, Mo Li and San Qian had already entered the house. Wow, this hut is great. Li Mo couldn't help but marvel at the fully equipped hut. Yeah, what kind of weirdo can think of pulling the house with 2 fish? Sanchin nodded. 3000. Look, there's a hut here. Li Mo opened a door, and inside the door was a low cabinet sandwiched between 2 beds. It's not bad, it seems that the owner here will enjoy it quite a bit. Ha ha. Sanchin was visiting the hut. The next second, Li Qian heard a snoring sound. When he turned around, sure enough, this guy was lying on the bed and fell asleep. Hey, we're leaving. Sanchin walked over and pushed it twice. Mo Li frowned, turned over, stretched out his arms, and hugged Sanchin beside the bed in his arms, and the 2 of them both lay on the bed. Ah, what are you doing? Sanchin's fair face instantly turned red. Ah, ____. You. After a long time, Sanchin didn't say anything, blushed, closed his eyes shyly, and snuggled into Li Qia's arms. Chapter 48, Fly Me Up. We're going to save Brother Frankie. Oh. The noise woke the sleeping 3000. Mo-Li, someone, Boom. Brother Straw Hat, here we come, the Frankie family. Mo-Li really has someone, ha ha, ha ha. Bang. Sanchin violently pushed Mo-Li off the bed. Are you going to suffocate me? What's wrong? Mo-Li touched his head and sat up from the floor. Someone came just now, and now they're gone. Sanchin said. Oh. You give me some seriousness. Sanchin shouted frantically. Let's go out and have a look. Seeing that Sanqian was angry, Li Qie also raised his strength. The two went out, looking at the round window with their heads next to their heads, and looking at the rough sea through the window. Both of them were confused. They were fine before going to bed. Sanchin's eyes narrowed, and he spread out the domineering look and heard clearly the actions of everyone in the Rocketman sea train in front of him. It can be said that it is a pirate ship targeting Judicial Island. Sanchin said to Mo-Li. Mo-Li's face instantly collapsed, and he said bitterly, that is to say, not only are we going to Judicial Island, but we are also going on a thief boat. Sanchin didn't say anything, looking at Mo-Li with a bitter face in front of her. She wanted to laugh a little. This guy, hiding from left to right, didn't dodge in the end, and things became outrageous. Listening to the meaning of the pirates in front, the government arrests their partners, they are going to rescue, and they also take a group of gangsters and boatmen to Judicial Island to rescue people. The magical combination made Sanchin want to laugh inexplicably. Looking at the waves outside the window, Li Qie heard the noise of the car in front of him, and fell into deep thought. Shall we snatch the car and run away? I always feel that this mission is very troublesome. It is a navy and a spy, and now a shipyard is involved. It's so hard. Listen, Mo-Li, there is a fight. Sanchin suddenly said. Well, it seems to be a slashing collision. Mo-Li nodded, the voice in front of him was too loud for him to hear. What is this? Mo-Li was puzzled, reached out and smashed the glass and grabbed a zombie man from the window. Zombies, Sanchin said in surprise, pointing at the person who was captured by Mo-Li. It seems so. Are you a zombie? Mo-Li took the handle of the knife and gently stabbed the man. I'm very sorry. It's hard to get into the elegant hall below, and I scared the two of you. T-Pen sat up and said dryly. Limo stared at him a few times and asked, Zombie, who are you? Below is Colonel T-Pen of the Admiralty. You are our contact person. We are here to carry out the mission. Sancheni was stunned and then said. Mo-Li pursed his lips. How lucky this is. 1 second, he was thinking about whether to grab the car and run away, and the next second, he pulled the connector back. Wait until Judiciary Island. Mo-Li said helplessly. This is already the case, let's take a step by step, but the mission has gone wrong. The escort mission agreed, the next 2 colonels are here, and those who need escort should run by themselves. The sky was bright, and I heard another loud roar in front of me. Everyone, Judicial Island is here. Everyone hurry up, we're going to rush into Judiciary Island. Go, Robin, we're here to save you. Limo irritably poked out his ears. Are all pirates so noisy? Pirates are all villains, T-Pen said coldly. Yes, boss, you've said it a dozen times this night. Li Qiye felt helpless. This zombie is too righteous. If it wasn't for him and Sanchin to stop him, this guy would definitely go ahead and fight hard. Can he beat them? It's such a big sea, and they killed them. Who will drive the boat? The 3 of them waited to log in, but they waited, and there was no movement. Hey, didn't you want to rush into Judiciary Island just now? Why is there no movement now? Are we not moving? Mo-Li scratched his head and said. Sanchin nodded, pushed open the door to look, and suddenly exclaimed, Mo-Li, come and see. Limo and T-Pen came out. In between, a steel train pressed against the iron fence of Judiciary Island and soared into the sky. Fly straight towards Judiciary Island. Hee hee. These grandchildren are quite good at playing, you say yes, zombie. Limo looked at the flying train and turned to look at T-Pen who was standing beside him with a smile. Huh, what about people? There, 3000 pointed to T-Pen who was running towards the gate of Justice Island. Fuck, this guy is so hot. For the justice and blood of the zombie face, Lee Kie was convinced. Let's go, Limo said. Where to go? Catch the pirates. Sanchin clenched his fists, eager to try. Limo directly started to knead the silver hair into a chicken coop. Fuck it, that's not our job. Go get a warship and let's go to Food Town. Oh, it's boring. Sanchin stroked his messed up hair and responded in a low voice. After speaking, the two went to Judicial Island, preparing to get a warship. But entering from the main entrance, you can see soldiers falling to the ground and wailing everywhere, as well as two giants doing damage everywhere. The roar was incessant. Whoosh! A humanoid object flew over, and Sanchin gently lifted it up and caught it with one hand. Yo hey, this is not a hot-blooded zombie, go fast, and come back faster. When Limo saw that it was T-Pen, this guy had a blue nose and a swollen face. Couldn't help joking. Mo, Colonel Mo Lee, the giants have betrayed. Pen said, pointing to the two giants that were wreaking havoc in the distance. Limo raised his eyes. Wow, this world is really strange, there are such giants. As soon as the words fell, Mo Lee stomped his foot, and the whole person rushed out like an arrow from a string. Instantly appeared in front of a giant. Yo, Big Bear. The giant saw a navy appear in front of him, and remembered that he had been deceived, and became more angry for a while. The huge iron nail and wooden hammer blasted at Mo Lee. Is Shangda angry? I happen to be angry too. Lee Kie smashed the wooden hammer that came from the bombardment with a punch. Boom. The iron nails and wooden hammers shattered, and sawdust scattered in the air were mixed with large iron nails. Ah, is this person a monster? The giant looked at the handle of the hammer in disbelief. Fly for me, Limo said, kicking the giant's chin. Bang. The huge force made the giant rise from the ground, and the huge mountain-like body leapt over the tall city gate and fell into the sea. Ah, ah, Pen and the rest of the navy opened their mouths and looked at Lee Kie in surprise. Mo, Colonel Mo Lee is so powerful, Pen exclaimed as he looked at Mo Lee who had landed on the ground. In order to avenge you, haven't you been beaten? Sanchin shrugged and said. It's really, Pen's dark eye sockets filled with tears. At this moment, Lee Kie didn't have time to pay attention to Peng's gratitude. He was holding the giant blue who was knocked down by the soldiers with one hand. Limo turned to look at the navy that fired the cannon on the building. Brothers, you knocked it down, did you ever think it would kill your colleagues? Chapter 49, Are they all from the circus? Mo Lee, who rescued the Navy soldiers, was sitting on the trash, watching the Navy men clean up the battlefield. Suddenly there was a panicked idiot sound from the radio phone bug in the center. 3000, do you know what the demon slaying order is? Mo Lee asked the 3000 next to him. Sanchin grew up on a peaceful island since she was a child. How did she know so much? She shook her head and said that she did not know. Mo Lee didn't get an answer from Sanchin, so he turned to ask Peng. I saw Pen's zombie face twisted, his pupils shrunk, and he said stutteringly, slaughter the devil, slaughter the devil. Order. Mo Lee looked at his uglier zombie face, and Mo Lee instantly turned into the expression of an old man in the subway looking at his mobile phone, thinking to himself, it's almost there, you're good enough, why do you still make a face? Yes, what does that demon slaughter order mean? I see that everyone is very nervous, and everyone is stunned. Pen swallowed his saliva, and quickly explained, the demon slaughtering order is the national-level combat power of the world government. The Lieutenant General of the 5th High School, led by 10 large battleships, will attack an island on the map indiscriminately. Whether people, animals, vegetation, will be wiped out, until they are wiped off the map. Limo nodded. It was the atomic bomb. That was quite scary. Since you are going to bomb here, let the Navy and staff take refuge first. Lee said. However, Penn shook his head and said in a low voice, it's very difficult. It depends on who the headquarters sent. If it's a few lieutenant generals from the Hawk faction, there will be no armor left here. Limo smiled. It's okay, I'll go tell them. You go and inform all the Navy and staff, try to gather as much as possible, and leave the rest to me. Penn stared at Molly in a daze. The man with a warm smile in front of him spoke with unquestionably strong confidence. Understood, I'll go right now. Boom, boom, boom. The building on Judiciary Island seemed to be cut diagonally by someone, and several buildings collapsed one after another. Molly sighed. These pirates are really capable of making trouble. Sanchin, you help Zombieface take refuge, and then contact Lao Sa. I'll go over there to see. Don't let them make trouble, they're all fucking bringing in nuclear bombs. Quote. Sanchin wanted to go with Molly, but looking at this man with a serious look, Sanchin still nodded. Molly smiled and rubbed Sanchin's head. I can't tell you, you see how messy this place is. It's outrageous, and I'll take you to Gourmet Town when the matter here is settled. He paused and smiled, just the two of us. As soon as he finished speaking, he sorted out the position of the saber, and a breeze wafted under his feet, and Li Qiye disappeared in place. Sanchin stared blankly at the place where Li Qiye disappeared, and suddenly his cheeks were slightly red, secretly delighted. Is this a date? Inside the building, Li Mo, who was facing a wall, frowned. Where is the road? Forget it, raising your hand against the wall is a punch. Bang. Molly walked past the ruins of the collapsed wall and muttered, it's almost been demolished anyway, so it's not bad for me. Huh, big sister wearing a sheet, be careful of catching a cold. Molly, who walked to a room, looked at Nami's defeat and leaned against the wall. Khalifa, said. Navy. Khalifa looked up at Molly. Yo, hello, no water in the bath. Clothes stolen. You are sexual harassment. Khalifa lowered her head and pushed her glasses. Limo pursed his lips, tore off his cloak and threw it over. Leave quickly, the nuclear bomb still has 10 minutes to reach the battlefield. Ignoring Khalifa, who was stunned in place, Limo continued to walk forward. Hey, I'm going. There are all kinds of weird people along the way, and they've all killed off their teeth. Dude, you're even worse, your teeth are zippered. Huh, is this a giraffe? Molly squatted beside the unconscious Kaku and began to study. Suddenly there was a change in the space next to it, and the space was opened like a door. Bruno appears. Ha, Torin, is this your ability? Space system. It's a bit awesome. Seeing the space being opened like a door and the Torin coming out, Molly immediately thought of devil fruit. The kind of power that transcends miracles. Bruno was taken aback. The Navy in the tavern. What are you doing here? I'm going to save my companion. Companion. So the wolf dog, the zipper, the lion clown, the eldest sister in the sheet, and the giraffe in front of you are all the companions of the Torin. How did you guys get out of the circus? Molly nodded and watched helplessly as the Torin helped the giraffe enter the space door, and then disappeared. He rubbed his lips. He was a bit powerful. If he recruited them as his subordinates, wouldn't his hot spring town have a circus? Shaking his head, Li Qiye walked onto the bridge of hesitation. At this time several large battleships have surrounded here. Watching the warship continuously firing shells towards Judiciary Island, Limo saw Doberman standing on the deck the moment he jumped onto the warship. Hey, Uncle Scarface, Molly greeted Doberman. Doberman was stunned. Why is Li Chi here? Mr. Li, why are you here? Not to mention it's good. This time Li has a bitter look on his face. He waved his hand and said, don't mention it. Don't bomb over there, it's all our people. Doberman frowned. He is an absolute hawk in the Navy and believes in absolute justice. How could he stop fighting because of someone else's words? But that is Molly, a character who can draw a level with Qingzi, and he heard flying squirrels say that killing a big pirate with a bounty of 7 or 8 billion is as simple as killing a chicken. Strong people are always attractive and convincing. In a split second, Doberman decided to give Mo-Li this face. Anyway, his immediate boss, Huang Yuan, was holding on to it. The notice goes on, the whole ship will stop attacking. In addition, inform the other lieutenants, Mr. Mo-Li, to request to stop the bombardment of the slaughtering order. Yes, the communications soldier led the way and ran to inform. Sure enough, after a while, the sound of the cannons of the demon slaughtering order stopped. Thank you, Uncle Scarface, Limo said to Doberman with a smile. It's okay, Mr. Mo-Li is someone admired by both the Warring States Marshal and General Sakaski. Doberman said, standing beside Mo-Li. Half of the orders Doberman gave and what he said now were compliments, and half were for Li Qiye. The Demon Slaughtering Order is a national-level strategic weapon that can only be launched at the general level. How can you stop it when you say it? But Mo-Li is a very special existence in the hearts of all the senior officers of the Navy. Doberman couldn't take this responsibility, but Li Qiye could. On the bridge of hesitation, 200 elite troops composed of lieutenant colonels and colonels of the Navy headquarters are besieging the Straw Hat Gang. Seeing that people were getting hurt constantly, Li asked, Uncle, aren't you coming? If it was you, it should be easy to deal with them, right? Doberman shook his head. He said coldly, this is their duty and their opportunity. Promotion requires not only strong personal strength, but also merit, and this group of pirates, they broke into the Judiciary Island and committed crimes. The heinous crime is the opportunity for these people. Quote. Seeing that someone was getting hurt constantly, Li Qiye sighed, even if you want merit, you can't die. Chapter 50, The Slash That Splits the Sea. There was a fierce battle on the bridge, and suddenly the broadcast sounded, there is a ship. There is a ship. Bombardment. Sink that ship. But the sailboat, as if dancing in the waves, dodged the shells. Suddenly someone shouted. The gates of justice are closed. The current has reappeared. Report. The door of justice is closed. Looking at the pirates on the bridge, they all jumped on the boat. The boat seemed to be conscious, carrying a boat of wounded, and using the power of the waves to avoid the whirlpool current. Doberman looked coldly at the boat that was beyond the range of the cannon. Otherwise, I'll come, Mo-Li said suddenly. Doberman was stunned for a moment, followed by Yishi, and with Mo-Li's flying slash, he would definitely hit the pirate ship. Then, it's hard work, Mr. Li. Mo-Li didn't answer, and silently pulled out the scabbard from his waist. Without any preparation, just stand beside the boat, facing the Golden Mary in the distance, slashing down and swinging the knife. A huge half-moon-shaped slash with flickering white light illuminated a piece of the sky here. Under the amazed eyes of all the navies, the slash cut across the sea, split the vortex current, and the sea was divided into two, hitting the windy Golden Ship. Mary no. Everyone on the Golden Mary had despair in their dull eyes. Are you done? At this time, Luffy's eyes widened, and he couldn't move his whole body, and he let the life out and shouted, Mary. The small sloop, the Golden Mary, seemed to understand. With the rudder on the left, the entire ship instantly tilted to the left. When Mo-Li's slash came, it could be avoided, but the stern was still smashed by the slash. Is it wrong? Mo-Li smacked his lips, wondering. Doberman frowned tightly. The slash was not biased, but the ship was strange. Limo shook his head. One more time, this time I'll cut horizontally, try it out and see how they can avoid it. As he spoke, he slashed across his chest. Ding! There was an ice chakra under Li Qiye's feet. Mo-Li looked at Bing Zan at his feet, tilted his head, and said softly, Uncle Ziliju. General Kuzan. Mr. General. Alara, this is really a huge slash, little brother Mo-Li. Qingzi appeared on the deck with a wobbly forehead. Doberman said with some dissatisfaction, Kuzan, what are you doing? Aokiji glanced at Doberman, then turned to look at the Golden Mary, which had run far away, shook his head and said, "Forget it, Lieutenant General Doberman, the Judiciary Island has been destroyed in half, the failure of CP9, and the Straw Hat escape, there's no denying that we failed, and that's it, I'll go and explain it to the top." "Little brother Mo-Li, you are here too." Kuzan suddenly looked at Mo-Li in surprise. "Nemes. Your play is a little too hard. Didn't you mention me in your first sentence on board?" Mo-Li twitched the corners of his mouth and hung the saber on his waist again. "Uncle Jiraiki, why are you here?" Qingzi walked beside Mo-Li, holding the boat's edge with both hands, facing the rushing sea breeze. Qingzi said, "Brother Mo-Li, is this going to return to the headquarters?" Li Mo waved his hand. "No, after this task is completed, I will take a 3-year vacation." Aokiji was taken aback. 3 years off? Didn't you just rest in the East China Sea for 3 years, why are you here for 3 more years? Qingzi glanced at him and said, "Little brother Mo-Li, stop joking." Mo-Li grinned and stopped talking to Qingzi. Now that the matter is over, it's time for him to leave Food Town. As soon as he heard it, he knew that it was a delicious place. Mo-Li found 3000, followed Doberman's warship, got off the boat halfway, sat on the sea train, and went to the food town. "Mo-Li, is this really okay?" Sanchen asked. Li Laoshen nodded, stretched out his hand, squeezed his thumb and index finger, and took a small gap. "Got it. A little thing, no, you know." Sanchen bit his lip, always feeling that this guy is not very reliable, but forget it, this is a date, why bother? Yohu, Food Town. Li Mo looked at the rows of vendors in the town, and all kinds of strangely shaped big fish carried by sailors. As far as the eye can see, there are a lot of tourists in the food town, and the port is full of various red and green boats. The town's architecture is different from the Western cowboy style of other towns, and this town has a very modern standard. Food Town, where all foodies yearn for. On the spacious street, Mo-Li drooled and looked around, thinking about what to eat first. "Yo, it's the Navy. Welcome." The owner of a barbecue stall cheered happily. "Hello, boss. 2 strings," Li Mo said with a smile. "Okay, guests, please wait a moment." The boss smiled and handed 2 skewers of barbecued meat to Mo-Li. "Well, it's really delicious." Li Kie was eating the meat, and he didn't forget to pass a bunch to Sanchen. "Well, it's delicious." Sanchen nodded while eating the barbecue. "I'm going. Look at the 3000, there seems to be delicious food there." Mo-Li looked at a large restaurant at the end of the street. There was a lot of people talking, and the door was surrounded by a group of people. Saying this, he took 3000 hands and ran over there. "Hey!" Sanchen exclaimed, and was dragged away by Mo-Li. The barbecued meat he had just eaten didn't hold steady and fell to the ground. As soon as Mo-Li and Sanchen left, the string of barbecue that fell to the ground was picked up by a dirty little hand. Regardless of whether it was dirty or not, they covered the barbecue in their arms and turned around and ran into the alley. That's delicious." The two sat in the dining room, and Mo-Li's eyes lit up as they ate happily. The empty plates on the table were gradually stacked. Soon the waiter took away the empty plates and served dessert and wine. The two clinked glasses and take a sip of red wine, and Mo-Li lit a cigarette given by Kizaru. He took a breath and looked at the warm smiles of the people outside the window. Comfortable. 3000, you said that such a day is not much better than fighting and killing. Mo-Li squinted and said to Sanchen. "Well, it is true that living here is very comfortable. Our Benos Island is deserted," Sanchen said. Mo-Li pouted, and when he mentioned Benos Island, he was angry. His good life was broken by Lao Sa. "When I go back this time, I must ask Laosa for a good resident, preferably like the food town here. Let's go shopping elsewhere." Sanchen looked at the clothing and accessories store by the roadside, eager to try. Okay. Li agreed against his will. The 3000 key people had already accompanied him, so he couldn't help but accompany her. Just as the two were about to leave, Li Qian felt that something was pulling at his trouser legs. Looking down, it was a dirty little girl about 6 or 7 years old. The little girl raised her head, her dirty little face was thin, and her eyes were dodging with fear. The loose clothes are tattered, and at a glance, you can tell that this is not her clothes. Good Mr. Navy, can you give me your leftovers? The little girl cautiously pointed to the small half of the cake left on the table, her voice was very soft, and her dodging eyes were filled with fear. Sanchin couldn't bear it, and looked at Mo Li eagerly. Li Mo looked at the little girl and frowned, it was very strange. Chapter 51. I can destroy an island too. The little girl frowned as she watched Mo Li. She was a little scared and took a few steps back. Mo Li. Sanchin looked at the little girl's frightened appearance. His eyes were sparkling, or he remembered his childhood. Oh, come on little sister, we won't eat the rest, brother and sister invite you to eat something delicious. Li Qian was called by Sancheni. He reacted, and then said with a smile. The little girl shook her head, looked at the leftover cake, and said, I want that one. Mo Li and Sanchin looked at each other, and Sanchin handed the little girl the piece of cake that he took a bite of. The little girl's dirty hands are holding a cake and smiling happily. Thank you, kind Mr. Navy, Sister Navy. After saying that, he turned around and ran away with the cake in his hand. Looking at the figure of the little girl running away, only to disappear into the crowd. Mo Li just turned his head to look at San Qian, and swallowed it just as he was about to speak. At this time, the heart of the 3000 Virgin Mary was bursting, and there were tears in her eyes. Boy, you cry when you say it. That 3000, don't get excited, just listen to me. Mo Li quickly changed the subject. Well, tell me. Sanchin pursed his lips and turned his head to look at Mo Li. Mo Li shook his head and said, 3000, why is there such a little beggar in such a food town? Sanchin heard the words and rolled his eyes. There are people who can't eat anywhere, okay. Li Mo said, did you really not notice? There are all scars under the girl's wide clothes, similar to the marks of beatings and bindings. Sancheni was startled, looked at Mo Li in disbelief, and said in a trembling voice, you mean, a human trafficker? Li Qian didn't speak. Seeing that Sanchin's mood was a little unstable, he patted Sanchin's hand. I'll find out tonight. That night, 3000's knowledge and color found the little girl. Deep in an alley, the little girl curled up in the darkest corner, with a big iron bucket in front of her, and she hid behind the iron bucket. It was as if the darkness behind the iron bucket could bring her a sense of security. In the darkness, the girl carefully opened a cloth bag, and inside it was the half of the cake that Sanchin gave her in the afternoon. The little girl swallowed her saliva, stuck out her tongue and carefully licked the cake, pinching a little bit and putting it in her mouth. So sweet, so sweet. Looking at the cake, the girl was not eating it, but wrapped it up and carefully put it into her arms. The small body, leaning on the big iron bucket, shrank back into the corner. After a long time, the younger brother died, the younger sister died, and the elder sister died, but I will not die. 3 lives have been exchanged for 1 life, I want to live, I will not die. 3 lives for 1 life. I can't die. 4 lives live together. The little girl trembled all over, and repeated a few words in her mouth. Li Qian appeared next to the big iron bucket with his arms around the sobbing Sanchin, looking at the little girl who had a fever and was somewhat delirious. Hey, Mo Li picked up the little girl with one hand and left with 3000. The next day. My cake, my food. On a big bed, the first thing the little girl woke up was to quickly touch herself, looking for the half of the cake. Hello. The girl turned her head when she heard the sound and saw Li Qian sitting beside him with a cold face. Stunned in shock. Ha ha. Seeing the girl fainted from fright, Li Mo slapped her knees and laughed wildly. Enough is enough. Sanchin suddenly roared with fangs. Oh, sorry. Mo Li scratched his head and apologized insincerely. Little sister, don't be afraid, don't you remember us? Sanchin patted the girl gently. The girl woke up faintly, and when she opened her eyes, it was 3,000 beautiful faces. The girl blinked at ease, looking at the person who was just scaring her. It was Mr. Navy who gave her the cake yesterday. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. Sister Navy, where am I? Looking at the unfamiliar environment, the gorgeous room, the soft, warm big bed. The girl asked 3,000 timidly. Seeing the girl's scared appearance, Sanchin felt a little distressed. She said, you can rest assured that it is safe here. You are sick, so you should rest well. The girl shook her head. Thank you, but I'm leaving. Sanchin was stunned. Where are you going? I'm going home. The young and cowardly voice is very firm. 3,000 turned back to look at Molly. Limo nodded slightly after thinking about it. He looked at the scar on the girl's arm and said, what are you talking about? We will help you. The girl looked down at the welts and streaks on her arms, lowered her head, and bit her lip. Seeing that the girl refused to speak, Limo got up and left. He would make the girl feel more nervous here. 3,000 is much better. Molly left. Sanchin looked at the girl tenderly and said softly, little sister, we are the Navy and will help you. The girl slowly raised her head, looked into Sanchin's eyes, and opened her mouth slowly. It turned out that there was a small island in the south not far from the food town. Pirates, gangsters, and human traffickers all gather on that island. The girl is the commodity caught and sold by the traffickers. The girl is 4 brothers and sisters. The elder sister and younger siblings fought desperately to attract the attention of the traffickers and create opportunities for the girls to escape. In the end, the girl escaped, but her sister and younger siblings were beaten to death by furious traffickers. The girl floated to the food town with a wooden barrel in her arms, hiding and daring not to show her face, because the traffickers were still looking for her. But she still lives strong, because her one life is 3 lives, and she wants to live well together in the name of her elder sister and younger siblings. The 3,000 people in the room were already sobbing, and Molly outside the room had already heard it. Ta-ta Dao. Li Kie held the handle of the knife in his left hand and walked out. Is it the island to the south? Hades can destroy an island. Actually I can too. Step on the sea, run fast, and go south. The sun is mild, there are a few faint white clouds floating in the sky, and the seagulls in the air are a symbol of freedom. And the outlaws in Garma town are also free. Their boss is Doflamingo, and his status as King Sha Chiwahai gives him the freedom to reasonably loot. It also became an umbrella for all of them. Ha ha ha, this batch of goods has gone out, and it's a lot of money. Yeah, it seems that the Murlocs are more popular. Ha ha ha. Traffickers and pirates are discussing a group of slaves sold by Gangnam, and every word is cold-blooded and brutal. Limo walked alone on the streets of Gamma town. The bloody smell shrouded the town. Dirty, disgusting filthy men and women could be seen everywhere. No navy would come here, so Limo appeared in the town and instantly caught everyone's attention. Everyone looked at Molly with fierce eyes. Some people are even ready to make a move. Get out of this island. Navy. Navy, do you want to die? I'll let you in. Some people drew their knives and shouted, their eyes flashing fierce. Molly turned a deaf ear. Suddenly he stopped, slowly raised his head, and looked at the clown-faced pirate in front of him. You're blocking my way, filthy pirate. The low, cold words came out from Limo's mouth that suppressed his anger. Chapter 52, It's so cool. When they saw the man's face clearly, everyone was shocked. It's Diamante, why is he here? Shouldn't he be in Dressrosa now? Why is he here? And he's provoking the navy. It was one of the top 3 cadres under Doflamingo, 7 Wuhai, who blocked Molly. Diamante, code-named EPUB. He is a clown-faced swordsman with flying fruit abilities. When Diamante heard these words, a twisted, frantic smile appeared on his face. He stared at the young lonely navy in front of him, the corners of his mouth cracked open, and the 2 oil paints on his face became more hideous with the shaking of his facial muscles. Contrary to him, Li Qiye held the handle of the knife in his left hand, his eyes were calm, and his face was expressionless. Navy. This is not the place for a waste like you to come. Diamandi grinned. Diamandi also just arrived here this morning. After all, this is Doflamingo's property. He came here because Dressrosa was a little bored, and second, some places needed to be inspected. As soon as I got here, I met Mo Li, an immature little navy, and he was still alone. Mo Li's eyes moved slightly, watching Diamandi's arrogant and surly appearance. The corner of his mouth opened lightly. I'm here to find the traffickers here, where are they? Diamandi was startled, then burst out laughing, looking at the navy in front of him who couldn't understand the situation. Ha 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 ha. Navy, you are still young, do you want to work so hard? This is the territory of King's 7 Wuhai, Tianyasha, Doflamingo. Have you figured out the situation? Ah, Navy. Diamandi's unbridled laughter spread throughout the town. Pirates, human traffickers, and gangsters gathered in the town all stood on both sides of the street and grinned at Mo Li. In their eyes, Mo Li was already dead. Diamandi pulled out his long sword, and the steel long sword instantly became as soft as a cloth in his hand and fluttered. Diamandi grinned. Farewell, young navy. Bull's head scepter. The usual wrapped fist in his hand turned into a bull's head with bull horns, and he slammed his right fist into Li's abdomen. Bang! A dull collision sounded, and a breeze blew through, and the steel fist that Diamandi smashed stopped on Li Qiye's abdomen, and his smile froze on his face painted with 2 red oil paints. This move hit Mo Li's abdomen firmly. He was sure that he had used 70% to 80% of his strength, and Mo Li couldn't dodge. However, this punch was like hitting a piece of 100 refined steel, and it didn't move at all. The young navy still stood there with a calm expression, and there was no fluctuation in his eyes. Huh, don't you know? After a while, the young navy seemed to react, blinked and looked at him. Diamandi shuddered. This guy is by no means a simple character. He clearly saw the frigid cold light that flashed in the other's eyes. Damn it, the damn navy. Diamandi closed his fists, took a few steps back in a flash, holding swords in both hands. His face was solemn, and he looked at Mo Li nervously. Are you swatting flies for me? How can you kill flies with such a small force? Mo Li said lightly. Yes, damn it. Diamandi's face was ugly, and a trace of fear slowly emerged in his heart. This kind of fear has never been felt by Doflamingo. The nervousness, the fear of Mo Li's powerful strength, the whole body began to tremble slightly. Damn it, I am the leader of the EPUB army. How could I be afraid? Diamandi's momentum soared, holding swords in both hands above his head. Half-moon broadsword. The long sword slashed down, sending out a cyan sword energy that shot straight at Mo Li. Boom. The smoke slowly dissipated, and Diamandi gritted his teeth, looking nervously at the dissipating smoke. Did it work? But after the smoke cleared, everyone watching the battle, including Diamandi, looked at Mo Li in horror. I saw Mo Li raised his left hand, his index finger was slightly bent, and there was no expression on his face. The monster. He blocked Diamandi's strongest slash with one finger. Diamandi's eyes were splitting, and he gritted his teeth. No, impossible. Mo Li withdrew his left hand, put it on the handle of the knife again, and slowly walked towards Diamandi. He said softly, I don't need the knife anymore, it might get dirty. Diamandi looked at Mo Li who walked towards him. The right palm that the navy slowly raised was coming towards his head. I will die. Diamandi's mind flashed 3 words. His mind struggled violently. He wanted to escape. He wanted to escape back to Dressrosa, but his body couldn't move, no matter how much he cried in his heart, how much his brain ordered. His body at this moment, out of instinctive fear, dare not move. Under the terrified eyes of everyone, Mo Li pinched Diamandi's neck, and his tall body knelt in front of Mo Li with a thump sound. Don't kill me, my. Click. Mo Li twisted Diamandi's neck, threw it aside, wiped his hands with the cloak of justice, and opened his mouth slightly. I thought you knew where the traffickers were. Come on, what are you kidding? Did he really kill Diamandi? Doflamingo won't let this Navy go. After a moment of silence, the people watching on both sides of the street whispered nervously and fearfully. Street center. Molly stood there, raised his head and squinted, and glanced left and right. He didn't raise the volume on purpose, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Excuse me, where are the traffickers in this town? Everyone is like a big enemy. Everyone in this town is a criminal, and no one is clean. Huh, don't you say anything. Molly tilted his head, looked left and right, and then nodded, then the one on the left. Everyone was surprised. What did he mean by the left side? But soon they knew. I saw Molly draw the knife, hold the scabbard in his left hand, and slash across the void. Boom, boom, boom. A huge white light slashed through the calm air, wrapped in a huge airflow, and flew towards the houses on the left side of the street. The slash disappeared, the smoke and dust dissipated. This island, with Molly as the center, where the slash passed, there were no humans, animals, vegetation, and only bare gravel and soil. Escape. Get out. They looked at the people who had been chatting and drinking just now, and they were killed by Molly in such an instant, turned into ashes, scared and fled in all directions. Molly's eyes turned, looking at the pirates fleeing to the right. He unhurriedly changed the knife to his right hand. The same horizontal slash as before, the same slash. The smoke and dust dissipated, and Molly looked at the small island that he had flattened with two knives. It was bare, and all he could see was loess and gravel. Putting the knife on his waist again, he turned and walked towards the port. As a result, Limo, who had just arrived at the port, was stunned. I saw a large gray-green tortoise lying on the rocks on the shore of the port. The turtle shell was covered with a blanket, a seat, a white cowboy hat, a cigar, and a pair of dead fish eyes. Molly was stunned, and after a long silence he said, "It's so tugging." Chapter 53. Her mother must be beautiful. Yes, Colonel Molly, we will send her home. A navy saluted Molly and shouted with confidence. However, his eyes always drifted behind Molly. A very tugging big turtle is watching here smoking a cigar. Seeing that the navy's eyes were erratic, Molly said, "Go, let's send the child." Sanchin held the little girl's hand. The girl held her mouth shut, her eyes filled with tears. She was even more speechless. Limo shook his head. He crouched down and put his palm on the girl's head, smiled and said softly, "Go home, take the brother and sister's sake, and live a good life." Yeah, the girl wiped her tears and nodded heavily. Go. Li Kie took the girl's little hand from Sanchin and led her to the warship. Brother Molly, elder sister Sanchin. The girl stood on the boat, put on a new dress that Sanchin bought for her, carrying a bare schoolbag, and looked back at Molly and Sanchin. Sanchin clutched his chest, looked at the distant warship, and waved goodbye. Molly stood beside Sanchian, looked at the girl as well, and sighed, "The little girl is so beautiful." Sanchin nodded. Yes, this little girl is very beautiful. As a result, Limo continued, her mother must be very beautiful. Sanchian's sadness for parting was broken by Molly's words. What is it? Sanchin asked, pointing at the big turtle smoking a cigar. Oh, my new mount. Limo said. Mount. Sanchin frowned and looked at the big tortoise. Why is it so tugging? Yeah, look, it has a blanket on its back, a seat, and a parasol when you sit on it. As he spoke, Lili jumped onto the seat on the turtle's back, and when he sat down, a parasol was raised behind the seat. Is it so amazing? Sanchin looked at the big turtle in surprise. Come on, 3000, let's ride the turtle out to play. Okay. On the sea, the tortoise carried the two of them for a slow paddling, the blue sea and blue sky, and the two enjoyed the feeling of the sea breeze. And in Dressrosa's palace. Doflamingo pinched the phone bug and looked at a photo of Molly on the table. The blue veins on his forehead were violently wriggling. At this time, he was like a depressing volcano about to erupt. He looked up and saw 3 tall chairs. The chair representing the square, whose owner died in paradise. Bang! The golden scepter hit the ground hard, and Torapal, who was sitting on the plum blossom chair, said bitterly, "Dover, you must kill that Navy." At the same time, a sharp voice sounded, and Pika, who was sitting on the spade seat, had a huge body, and his muscles were agitating. "Dover, do you want me to go?" Doflamingo turned gloomy and put on a pink feather cloak. "No, I have more important things to do. The world government calls Kibukai, and the opponent is Whitebeard." "Yeah, nah, Dover, is it because the guy named Blackbeard got the fire fist?" Torapal said. Doflamingo did not answer, but said, "Prepare the ship, I will find a chance to kill that Navy." Brother Doflamingo left, leaving 2 people in the house. At first, the 3 pirates who were like defeated dogs chose the young and talented Virgo, and later they were killed by the overlord when Doflamingo was dying. The color is domineering and shocked, so he gives up Virgo and chooses Doflamingo. The 4 people who once knelt before Doflamingo swore allegiance. Now Virgo is undercover in the Navy, and Diamandi is dead. Under Torapal's funny expression, he turned to look at Pika, who was brooding with his arms folded beside him. "Hey, Pika, will you die one day too?" After speaking, he opened his mouth and snorted, waiting for Pika's answer. After a moment of silence, Pika glanced at the family member who had been with him for many years, and said in a shrill voice, "Take care of your underground factory, Torapal." 5 days later, Lee and Sanchin stopped and walked, visiting different islands. On a small island called Wabuji Island, Limo is studying an ostrich. 3000, this ostrich is a taxi. Lee Kie sat on the ostrich's back excitedly. Sanchin led the tortoise over, pointed to the sign hanging on the ostrich's long neck and said, "It says that the train can only start at noon, and we take the ostrich, so what should I do?" Benben is exactly the name Sanchin gave to the big turtle. Maybe it was the red one who was close to the vermilion and the black one who was close to the ink. Now, the ability of Sanchin to name the turtle has been completely taken away by Moli. Limo looked at the big stupid turtle, then at the big ostrich, and jumped down after thinking twice. "It's a pity, I can't ride an ostrich." Moli pouted, a little unhappy. Sanchin shrugged and said helplessly, "I can't keep up with the speed of an ostrich." "Then let's go and see what's new on the island." Limo sat on the stupid back, lit a cigarette, and said. The 2 rode Bumbo around the island. As an outsider, Lee Kie felt that any strange species he saw was very fresh, and Sanchin was very perfunctory. "Wow, 3000, you see, a dog that walks on 2 legs. Hi. Fuck, this, dachshund, can circle the earth 3 times, do you believe it? Hi. I tilde go. Is the frog freestyle okay? Hi. Yo, there are beauties. Bang. If you don't want the eyes anymore, just tell me straight." Sanchin roared and took his fist off Limo's head. It was noon after wandering around, and the 2 sat at the roadside stall to eat. Moli took a bite of the vegetable meat roll and muttered, "Ostrich taxis are leaving now." 3000 Fu forehead is helpless, and he is still thinking about the ostrich taxi. Suddenly, a slightly surprised voice came from behind the 2 of them. "Mr. Moli, I didn't expect you to be here too." Huh. Moli looked back with a bulge in his mouth. "Uncle Bazaihu," Moli greeted and then asked, "Have you eaten yet?" Flying Squirrel twitched the corners of his mouth. "You're good, eating and drinking here. General Yellow Monkey is so anxious to go crazy." "Mr. Lee, follow my warship back to headquarters later." Limo shook his head. "No. I'm on vacation." Flying Squirrel was stunned, not knowing what to say. Why do these powerful people always think differently? The 3 generals of the headquarters are also, one is doing all the work of eliminating evil all day long, one is lazy, and the other is simply a salary thief. At this time, the 3000 spoke. Let's go back. Jimmy and Kumik are still waiting at home. Even if we go out to play, we have to take them with us. Molly glanced at Sanchin in amazement. This girl has changed her sex. 3000 blackface in an instant. What's the matter with your surprised expression in doubt? After thinking about it, Lee Kie also thought that it would not be good to keep the two of them in the headquarters. That's all right, let's go back to the headquarters and talk about it. When the flying squirrel heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief. Good guy, he finally caught the two of them. Recently, in order to find the two of them, Kizaru was about to issue a wanted order. Chapter 54. Kizaru's Spear and Arrow. Marin Van Do Harbor. As soon as Molly and Sanchian walked to the square, they saw a little girl in black with a cute watermelon hairdo, staring blankly at the sailors coming and going. Molly put his mouth open, took 2 steps, put his hands on his hips, and shouted, shouting. Come and pick up your master soon. Looking at the Navy kumis with guns and knives, he was stunned, and immediately ran to Molly's side, jumping happily, kumi tilde. Molly smiled, stretched out his hand to hold down the stupid little puppet, and said, why are you not enlightened? After saying that, as soon as his wrist was twisted, Kumik started to circle in place. Turning and turning, Kumik felt amused and ran in place. Soon. Kumi tilde halo tilde. Like a big frog, snapping, lying on the ground. Ha ha. Molly laughed heartlessly. Sanchin rolled his eyes at him, and quickly picked up the dizzy puppet and brushed the soil off the black dress. She looked around and said with a chuckle, you little guy, you can't tell the difference between good and bad, and you like to get close to those who play tricks on you. Sanchin led Molly, and Benben carried Kumik back to his home in District A2. Yo, Jimmy. Limo waved his hand. Jimmy, who was choosing vegetables in the yard, was stunned for a while, looking at Molly and Sanchian outside the yard, as well as Kumik, who had been out to play since the morning. Then, ignoring Molly's greeting, he turned around and entered the room, and walked out with a vegetable basket in a short while. What are you doing here? Lee Kie asked. You're all back, do you still have enough food? With that, Jimmy left. Molly and Sanchian looked at each other, blinked, and then both laughed. Jimmy, a hot-looking royal sister, has the opposite personality to hers. In addition to teasing Molly and arguing with Sanchian, she is really a family-friendly woman. After eating at noon, Molly was sleepy again and yawned lazily. He was just about to take a nap when someone shouted outside the hospital. Colonel Molly, General Huang Yuan called you over. Molly rolled his eyes. This old man didn't let anyone sleep even after a good night's sleep. Pushing open the door, he followed the Navy to Kizaru's office. Huang Yuan took a sip of tea, glanced at Molly, and said with a teasing, Yo tilde, are you willing to come back? Molly ignored the yin and yang of Huang Yuan, picked up the cigarette on the table, lit one, and put the remaining half of the pack in his pocket. I've smoked a lot of cigarettes, but no brand is as good as Kayabu's cigarettes. Huang Yuan looked at Molly and didn't say anything, just opened the drawer and took out 2 cigarettes and pushed them to Molly. Lily put the cigarette in front of him and said, I went to Judicial Island. I also helped with that pirate group, but it was stopped. I believe you know it. Kizaru nodded. Qingzi had already explained it to the Warring States Marshal, and he naturally knew it. Huang Yuan said, it's strange that I can't get through when I call you. It's weird if they can get through. The phone bug is still lying on the bottom of the water in the 7 capitals of water. Limo said, that thing is hard to handle, who knows where it fell. Huang Yuan didn't bother, and threw a watch and phone bug directly to Molly. Where it? Limo opened the lid and saw that it was a phone bug. He asked curiously, Little Genius Children's Watch. Huang Yuan pouted, not understanding what Molly was talking about, just nodded. This is a portable phone bug. As long as you don't take it down, you won't lose it. Limo shrugged. The watch given by the leader must be worn no matter what. Master, is there anything else? Li Qian asked. Mo-Li, don't go out for the next 2 days, it will be busy next time. Huang Yuan said. Mo-Li didn't twist. What happened? Kizaru shook his head, didn't say much, just said, the headquarters has a big move and needs combat power, you should stay in the headquarters first. Li Qian was a little reluctant. What is Tiantianwo doing here, watching the training of the big bosses? Just as Mo-Li was about to speak, Huang Yuan said directly, let's do it for now. When things are over, you can go to the paradise to garrison troops, and you can stay as long as you want. Really? Li Qian asked. Really? Huang Yuan nodded affirmatively, but he was afraid that Mo-Li would run away without permission. Then he said, the paradise is the hub connecting the front and rear sections of the Great Route. There are huge bubble trees, pleasant weather, and the amusement facilities and delicacies from all over the world. Quote. Hearing Huang Yuan's words, Mo-Li was a little moved. If paradise is really like what Lao Sa said, it's not impossible to agree to it. The worst result is to go back to his hot spring island to find Daqiang after being busy for a while. After thinking for a while, Li Qian agreed. All right then. Li Mo nodded. Huang Yuan looked at Mo-Li, who thought seriously and finally agreed, almost smiled, but there was no expression on his face. Calm like a yellow ape, he is not soft-hearted at all. Putting on the phone bug, he picked up 2 cigarettes. Mo-Li waved his hand, just about to go out. After thinking about it, he turned around and asked, what's the name of the paradise? The Chambord Islands, said Kizaru. Mo-Li thought about it for a while, but he didn't hear it, so he pouted and left. As soon as Mo-Li returned to his small courtyard, he saw Kumik squatting beside the fish pond, staring blankly at the carp jumping up and down in the fish pond. Li Mo walked over, squatted beside Kumik, rubbed her head, and asked, what are you looking at? Kumik pointed to the carp that sprang out of the water from time to time, and stammered, fish, jump. Fish. Mo-Li watched the big carp fly up and down, and it was outrageously active, so he couldn't help nodding. What a fierce carp, it's going to jump over the dragon gate. Then the 2 of them squatted beside the fish pond and watched the big carp jump out of the water one by one. After a while, Jimmy came back with a basket of ingredients and saw 2 black objects squatting on the edge of the fish pond. Not knowing why, she stretched her neck curiously and asked, what are you 2 doing? Mo-Li and Kumik turned their heads at the same time, pointing at the big carp that jumped out of the water, and said in unison, fish. Jump. A few black lines ran down Jimmy's forehead, and the 2 of them watched a fish jumping and stomping, and they were still not serious. Ignoring them both, he went straight to the kitchen. After watching for a while, Li Qian raised his eyebrows. You really want to jump over the dragon gate? Actually, it's not necessary. Kumik looked at Li Mo to reason with the fish dumbly. Think about it, what's so good about being a dragon? A monkey will come and tear down the pillars of your house. A monk in a while, you tilde turn you into a horse. I'll have another kid that day, hit your head with a big bracelet, skin you, and cramp your tendons. If you think about it now, it's not bad to be a fish. Mo-Li looked at the big carp that was still jumping, and licked his lips. At most, it was stewed. Mo-Li suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed the big carp that was jumping in the air, turned around and shouted, Jimmy. Add a dish. Kumik, who was still squatting on the spot, stared blankly at Mo-Li grabbing the fish and leaving. What happened? What about my fish? Chapter 55. Come. I will fly with you. Blue blue blue. Gotcha. The phone bug on Li Qian's wrist instantly became obscene. Mo-Li, let's go with this old man. Mo-Li put out the cigarette, shifted his body on the soft couch, and said, Master, I have something to do and I can't go. But the yellow monkey said, Really? It's a pity, there are more than a dozen pirates who went to your future station, where almost half of the island has been demolished. Mo-Li was shocked and sat up abruptly. What is it? Are you stealing your home? Yeah, it's a good paradise island. The yellow monkey on the phone worm said regretfully. Wait for me. Chambord Islands, entrance 1 to 29. Huang Yuan and Mo Li are about to arrive. Mo Li put his hand on his forehead and looked at the land island that consisted of several huge trees and tangled roots. Wow, this is the shampoo field. The colorful bubbles are so pretty. Kizaru stood at the bow of the boat with his hands in his pockets, pouted and said, Mr. Mo Li, now is not the time to play. There are several powerful pirates on the island that look like monsters. Limo shrugged and looked back at the four guys on the deck with huge upper bodies and tiny legs, then looked at the man who was carrying a big axe and wearing a belly band, and asked, That's Zandao, the four of them are quadruplets. Zantaomaru looked at Mo Li and said loudly, My name is Zantaomaru. I am also the direct subordinate of the old man, and the most strict man in the world. Mo Li smacking his lips, Well, you are strict, you just don't plan to tell me. If that's the case, then it's... Before Mo Li could finish speaking, he heard Zantaomaru say in a loud voice, This is a war weapon, pacifist, with a tyrannical and huge body combined with the absolute attack power of the old man's fruit ability. It is a member of the Naval Science Unit. The latest weaponry, the cost of a pacifist, is the cost of a top battleship. Mo Li stared at Zantaomaru blankly, his mouth was really strict. Zantaowen looked at Mo Li with a strange look at him, and immediately realized that he had slipped the tongue, and said angrily, I told you on my own initiative. Ha ha. Mo Li smiled awkwardly, and no longer looked at Zantaomaru with a wrinkled face. So embarrassing, I was embarrassed for him. Li Qiye took a breath. Okay, the old man is leaving first, you have to follow up quickly. Huang Yuan said suddenly. Then he turned his head and said to a school officer, Let's fire the cannon, Li and I will go first. What's the matter? Fire. Mo Li looked at the yellow monkey in confusion. Huang Yuan looked at Mo Li and said with a smile, Come on, little brother Mo Li, I'll take you to fly. Mo Li was even more confused, Why did you take me to fly? Boom, boom, boom. The three main guns on the bow of the battleship fired a salvo, and Kizaru grabbed the confused Mo Li and jumped to a cannonball to stand still. Limo wanted to scold her mother, Why did you just take me to fly like that? Fly with cannonballs. Boom. The three cannonballs exploded in the center of the fleeing pirates. The smoke and dust dissipated. Mo Lisheng lay helplessly in the pit blown out by the cannonballs, and the yellow monkey turned into a golden flash and fell to the ground unharmed. Huang Yuan glanced at Mo Li and said in surprise, I thought little brother Mo Li could fly. Mo Li glanced at the yellow monkey, sat up from the pit, patted the dust on his body, took out a cigar from his pocket, and lit it up. Why did you change to smoking cigars? Kizaru asked. My family bought it. It was Jimmy who bought the cigars for Mo Li. Jimmy found that most men in the Navy smoked cigars, and only women smoked cigarettes. Thinking about it, it was very inappropriate for Mo Li to have a cigarette in his mouth all day, so he bought a box of cigars. Since Jimmy showed his amazing cooking skills, Sanchin willingly handed over the financial power to Jimmy. After all, whoever can cook is justified. Holding the knife handle at his waist in his left hand, he walked slowly down the big pit, looked around, and said, Old Saw, let's split up. Also, don't bomb everywhere and destroy my territory. Huang Yuan nodded casually, ignoring Mo Li who had left, and opened the phone bug on his wrist. Moses. Yeah, that's weird. Kizaru looked at the unresponsive black phone bug on his wrist. At this time, the yellow monkey is like an old man fiddling with a smartphone, looking for buttons on the large screen. Little brother Mo Li, you know. Hey, where is Mo Li? Huang Yuan looked to the side and found that Mo Li was gone. How come one or two don't care about an old man like me? There are still terrible pirates on the island. Kazuna muttered in dissatisfaction. Run, it's Kizaru. The future is coming. When the pirates saw it was Kayabu, they roared and ran away. Attention! Pirates are everywhere on the island. If you find a pirate with a bounty of over 100 million, notify the school-level officer as soon as possible. Fate, this little clever ghost, is just a bare child. Lee has been wandering around 2 or 3 times, but still can't see where the pirates are, and there is a constant roar in his ears. Running towards the source of the explosion, always straying, and then not knowing where it is. Molly was biting his cigar and looking for pirates everywhere. If he continued to destroy it like this, what's the use of wanting this broken place? Walking out of an alley, a fountain entered Molly's line of sight. A group of pirates gathered by the fountain, all dressed in strange clothes, interesting and tight. One of the pirates said nervously to the blonde man sitting by the fountain, "Captain, we should go." The indifferent blonde man, fiddling with a deck of cards, said, "It doesn't have to be this way. All destiny is a foregone conclusion and cannot be changed." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Qian stood in front of him. "Hello, may I ask if you are pirates?" All the pirates looked at Molly nervously. This man's speed was unusual, and everyone didn't notice how he appeared suddenly. A man with long braids swallowed his saliva and said nervously, "Captain. You retreat first, we will cover you." The blonde man slowly raised his head, glanced at Molly, and said lightly, "Don't worry, today is not the time for me to go to hell." A few straws grew from under his feet and stretched out before him. Reshuffled the shuffle, drew one and placed it on the straw tip. Defeat rate, 100%. Excuse me, the old man is looking for 2 more men, one is called. "Huh, are you here?" Kizaru appeared suddenly, and before he finished speaking, he saw Molly staring blankly at Hawkins' fortune-telling. Molly was startled, turned to look at Huang Yuan. He said, "Look at Lao Sa, he is telling fortunes." Escape success rate, 4%. Huang, Kizaru, Captain, run. Defense avoidance rate, 22%. Kizaru pouted and said, "It's really leisurely." The magician, Basil Hawkins with a bounty of 249 million Baileys. Hearing this, Molly frowned, pointed to Hawkins who continued to stick his cards on the straw in front of him, and asked, "Master, is he one of the criminals offering a reward for destroying my territory?" Kizaru nodded. "Yes, one of this year's supernovas is the terrifying big pirate." Hawkins drew his cards unmoved. The hanged man represents. Boom. Molly kicked Hawkins into the air, and under Molly's powerful force, Hawkins flew backwards and crashed into 4 or 5 buildings behind him before stopping. "Ah, Captain! Captain!" Li Mo's speed was extremely fast. After kicking Hawkins, the surrounding pirates were stunned for a while before they reacted. Li put down his feet. "Lao Sa, please speak faster next time." Kizaru looked at the smoke and dust of the house in the distance, and pouted. It's scary. Chapter 56, Infernal Affairs. Boom. Hawkins stood up from the ruins with difficulty, and a small straw man emerged from the gap in the straw arm. Clack. Fall to the ground. Hawkins came out and looked at Molly with solemn eyes. "You're a monster too. 10 stand-in scarecrows, are they enough?" The pirates were shocked. This guy abolished a stand-in scarecrow with just 1 blow. At the same time, a certain pirate who was escaping suddenly had a sunken chest and flew away. When he landed, his eyes turned white and he was already dead. Kizaru touched his chin with one hand and pointed at Hawkins who turned into a scarecrow with the other, and said in a strange tone, "Look at Molly, these guys with bounties over 100 million are as strong as monsters." Li Mo nodded solemnly. It is indeed an interesting ability. At this moment, a black shadow fell from the sky and fell in front of Hawkins. The man was tall and muscular, with a pair of small white wings on his back, and a black hexagonal pillar fell down together. It is one of the supernovae, monk, Yerki. Yerki, whose face was covered in blood, lay on the ground with a wry smile. "It's really tough, Chiwahai." "Shibuhai." Hawkins frowned. Boom. A huge black shadow fell from the sky. "Tyrant, Bartholomew Bear." Hawkins looked ugly. He pointed at Huang Yuan and Molly. "There are stronger ones." Werji followed his line of sight and was shocked, and said bitterly, Chiwahai and the general are here, it seems that my deadline is approaching. Hawkins didn't speak, and Yerki also staggered to his feet. Both of them looked at Kizaru and Big Bear vigilantly. Pacifist quadruplets. Moli tilted his head. The pacifist, rushing towards Yerki, throwing a fist and smashing it. Suddenly, a very fast figure flashed by, holding a four-edged axe in one hand and a long knife in the other. Against the pacifists it was a series of bells and whistles, with the last kick flying. Moli frowned as he looked at the pacifist who was kicked away and collapsed another building. Turning his head to look at the man, there are weapons in both hands, an X-shaped scar mark on his chin and chest. Oh, isn't this Major General Drake? Kizaru said in surprise. Hulong, Kizaru. Derek was stunned when he heard the sound, then looked back at Kizaru in surprise. You're actually here. Under the obscure eyes of Kizaru, he pulled a subtle smile. Moli stared blankly at the situation at the scene. This can be his future residence. What happened to her mother? Blue blue, blue blue. Moses, I'm a yellow ape. Kizaru took out a phone bug, which imitated the appearance of Zontaomaru. Father, why didn't you contact me? Oh Tilda, I can't get in touch with you, the phone bug is broken. Hulong Yuan said. How many times have I said it? That's a phone bug. Of course I can't be reached. It could be heard that Zontaoan on the phone bug side was quite helpless. Ah, is that so? Kizaru pouted, looking very bad. Forget it. Come on, old man, the main culprit who attacked the Tianlong people, Straw Hat Luffy, Trafalgar Law, and Eustace Kid are all here. Well, that's fine. Hulong Yuan paused, looked at the situation here, and said to Moli, I'll leave it to you here, I'll go over there. Limo nodded, not much, he was considering how to kill them all without destroying the building. Warehouse. Seeing Moli's agreement, Hulong Yuan heard the sound of the knife being unsheathed as soon as he lifted his foot to leave. Hulong Yuan turned his head and saw that Limo's thumb was against the handle of the hilt, and the blade of the saber was already exposed. Limo planned to make a quick decision, and quickly hacked them to death with a sharp blade. Hey, Moli, I have something to tell you. Hulong Yuan said quickly. Moli squinted at Hulong Yuan, have you left yet? Kizaru shrugged, stood beside Moli, and said a few words in a low voice. Moli was stunned for a while, his eyebrows lowered, then what about my loss? The headquarters will pay. Limo nodded, indicating that he knew. After Kizaru gave the pacifist an order to withdraw, he also turned into a ball of golden light and left. Ding! With the saber back in its sheath, Li Kie looked at the three of them and stopped on Drake. Hee, infernal affairs. He hooked his fingers at the three of them. Come on, I'll play with you. If you beat me, I'll let you go. Moli was a little bored right now. His hometown was demolished by a bunch of little pirates, but there was still an infernal affairs inside, so he couldn't kill them. It's not too much to beat the fire. But things didn't develop in the direction that Li Kie envisioned. The three people present came out of Hawkins and looked at Moli dignifiedly, putting on a posture of waiting. Drake and Erki didn't even look at Li Kie. A small naval officer, they don't know how many they have defeated along the way. In their eyes, Moli is no different from a miscellaneous soldier. As for what Kizaru said to Moli just now, because the two of them didn't care, the Navy Admiral looked down on him. Drake twisted his neck, looked at Erki lying on the ground, and sneered, Monk, you don't have that kind of courage, do you? Monk, Yerki, who was still lying on the ground, laughed, have you been underestimated? After laughing, then let you experience my power. Ah! Ergi bounced off the ground, his legs straddled and charged, and with a loud roar, Ergi's figure soared, bursting through his clothes in an instant, revealing his muscles with an explosive feel. Limo looked at the changed Ergi in amazement. He was a bit arrogant, and he could actually stretch. Hawkins looked at Yerki's change in amazement. Drake clenched the weapon in the handshake tightly, thinking to himself that this year's supernova is very powerful. Whether it is the topical character Straw Hat Luffy, or the two guys in front of him, they are not generally strong. On the roof of the building in the distance, Hai Ming, Apu looked excited. Haha. It's a strange ability, it's getting more and more interesting. But the crew behind Apu didn't think so, and they all panicked. Captain, let's run away. The yellow monkey is gone, it's a perfect opportunity. Apu didn't care, his voice gradually became lower and lower. It's carnival time now. Molly looked at Yerky, who was taller than a pacifist, and not only felt, brother, your chest muscles are so exaggerated. Ergi grinned and said with a wicked smile, really? Then I'll take care of you first, and kill Chiwahai. Wuerji stepped out, his right foot was so powerful that he smashed the ground and fell into it. He raised his huge left fist and slammed it towards Molly. Yo, it looks like that. Molly looked up at the fist that was close at hand, clenched his left hand, and held it out. Tough Yerky. Bang. When the two circles collided, a circular airflow burst out, and Yerky, who was attacking from a height, had already flown out at this time. Limo slowly retracted his fist and smiled. Look, you're puffy, aren't you? Yerky smashed the fountain, vomited blood, and the water poured on him. He couldn't get up in a mess, lay on the ground groaning, panting heavily. Hawkins was sweating coldly, and the nails of his fingers trembled in the state of demonic subduing. Drake clenched his weapon subconsciously, bowed slightly, and took a fighting stance. Apu in the distance widened his eyes in shock and couldn't believe it. Hey, liar. A supernova with a bounty of 180 million was kicked away by a small kernel. In fact, Apu doesn't know, just relying on the supernova that just debuted. How about the old bird of the new world? Limo shook his hand, lit a cigar, and turned to look at Hawkins and Drake. Huh, aren't you going? If you beat me, you can go. Chapter 57. Acting gradually matures. After struggling for a while, Yerky stood up slowly panting, rubbed his arms, and picked up the hexagonal column on the ground. He said in a heavy voice, be careful, this navy is very strong. We may be killed. No need for your nonsense. Drake put away the weapons in both hands and stared at the somewhat lazy Molly. His heart was slightly bitter. This navy is very strong. If it is accidentally killed, the devil fruit eaten for the mission and all the plans prepared will be in vain. I have no choice but to bite the bullet. Roar. Drake's body gradually swelled, and his skin became green and rough. Boom, boom, boom. Drake rushed towards Li Kie, and every step he stepped on would shake the ground and make a strong vibration sound. Oh, is this a raptor? Looking at the huge fang-toothed mouth biting towards him, Li Kie raised his right leg and stepped on the adjacent dinosaur's giant jaw. Boom. Drake's huge dragon head was stepped on by Molly, and no matter how his huge body struggled, he couldn't move half a point. I'm sorry, town blocks, dinosaurs can't run around. Molly stepped on Drake and said lightly. The image of the demon. Hawkins shouted next to him. I saw Hawkins grow a little bigger again, wielding a straw-spiked knife and slashing at Molly. Molly raised his eyelids, reached out to hold the nail, and restrained Hawkins. What? Yerky roared. The hurt I endure will turn into my strength. Karma. The body swelled incredibly, the muscles were more solid, and the blue veins were exposed. Holding up the hexagonal black column, pressing the air, he smashed it down towards Molly's head. Bang! Molly's other hand firmly caught the hexagonal pillar. At this moment, Molly was stepping on Drake, holding Hawkins' knife in his left hand, and holding Yerky's hexagonal column in his right hand. Suddenly, Molly smiled. Ha ha, do you think this pose is shameful? But, damn Navy, Yerky blushed and pressed down with all his strength. Navy, stop looking down on people. Hawkins opened his mouth wide, and spit out several black nails from his black mouth. Molly raised his eyebrows, and with a strong left hand, he pulled Hawkins' knife to block the black nails. The right palm holding the hexagonal prism shrank, instantly forming a fist, slamming towards the bottom of the hexagonal prism. Bang! At the same time that the pillar was blown away, Ergi was also taken out by a huge force and smashed into the building complex. Boom! The smoke and dust suddenly rose, and Yerki's life and death were unknown. Pulling back with his left hand, Hawkins was staggered by Molly's huge force. He clenched his fist with his left hand and smashed it into Hawkins' stomach. Bang! Hawkins flew out like an arrow from the string, smashing a building. After finishing the two, Limo raised his right leg, and the moment Drake broke free and stood up, Limo was pressed to the ground again. He lowered his body and said in a low voice, "Major General Velociraptor, for you, my acting skills have gradually matured." After saying that, he grabbed Drake's neck and threw it towards the back. Molly clapped his hands, took the pod and flicked the ash, and put it in his mouth. "Hey, you just met me. If you met anyone else, you would be dying." The three were beaten back into human form, all laying in the rubble, their eyes white, and their life and death were unknown. On the building in the distance, Apu, trembling, looked at Molly in the distance in disbelief. Monster. 3 supernova pirates, playing like children in front of him. Escape. Escape. After that, Apu took the lead, turned around and jumped quickly on the roof to escape. Huh, a fish slipping through the net. Limo turned to look at Apu, and instantly appeared beside Apu, looking at Apu's clothes. "Big brother, your dressing style is very similar to that of my hometown." "Ah, you." Apu was too frightened to speak. This monster was clearly on the battlefield, why did it appear here in an instant? When the two met, the conversation only happened in an instant. In midair, Molly twisted his waist without using any force. He just used the force of rotation to kick Hai-Ming, Apu on the shoulder. Boom! Like a cannonball, Apu smashed down and shattered a house. Molly stood on the roof, overlooking the battlefield, took out a cigar from his arms and lit it. At this time, his heart was as calm as water. With this level of combat power, how dare he be called a supernova? Maybe it would be better for them to die here, rather than go to the New World and do something nasty along the way. But if you kill them, the little dinosaur will be a little bit more difficult to handle. Limo shook his head and just turned to leave when he heard a roar from behind. Immediately afterwards, the sound of an oppressive gust of wind struck. As soon as Lily turned around, the hexagonal prism used by Yerki had already flown in front of him. Bang! Molly pressed against the hexagonal prism with one hand, his fingers exerted force, the hexagonal prism was like paper paste, and Molly's fingers sunk into it. He tilted his head and avoided the sight blocked by the hexagonal prism. "I saw that, strange monk." Ergi was much taller, and the muscles on his body were like cast iron. The blood oozing from his forehead was on his face, and with Ergi's hideous smile, he was like a ghost at this time. Molly hooked the corner of his mouth, threw away the hexagonal prism, and then flashed in front of Ergi. Compared to the two of them, Ergi, who is 15 or 16 meters tall, and Molly, who is 1 meter and 9 meters tall, are too different in body shape. "Navy, my pride as a Sky Islander really doesn't allow me to run away like a defeated dog." Ergi roared, the big hands that could wrap Molly together. Clenching it into a fist, he slammed it down at Molly. The punch that exhausted all of Ergi's strength, wrapped in the power to compress the airflow, all poured out. Molly raised his eyes slightly, pushed up with his right hand, and received a fist with his palm. Boom! As the fists and palms intersected, enormous power poured into the ground, and the ground beneath the two of them shattered, forming a huge deep pit more than 10 meters wide in an instant with the two of them at the center. Success! Yerki was overjoyed. Huh, it doesn't feel right, it's not the feeling of smashing someone to death, but... In Ergi's terrified eyes with despair, Li Kie grabbed the fingers of his hands. Press down slowly. Click. 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 Yerki felt the force in his hands, and he slowly bent down under the force until... Bang! Ergi knelt in front of Li Qian. I'm not used to looking up at people who are weaker than me. In Li Na's words without a trace of emotion, Ergi felt what it was for the first time since he went to sea. Irresistible. Molly looked at the sluggish Ergi and said softly, I'll let you go. Among the few people, you still have some backbone. Then, just as Molly let go of his hand, Wu Ergi seemed to have exhausted all his strength and fell limply into the pit. Eyes empty and desperate. Blue blue, blue blue. Kacha. Molly, where are you? Zan Taomaru's voice sounded. I just finished my work. Li Mo said. Come here quickly, the old man is blocked, and the situation is a little chaotic. Coming soon. Kacha. Zan Taomaru stared blankly at the phone bug, coming soon. I didn't say where, okay. Just as he was about to make a phone call, he remembered that the old man had said that Molly was a lunatic, and he could get lost in Marinfandos Square, so he gave up the phone call. He turned his head and shouted to the navy next to him. You all set out to find Colonel Molly. If you find it, bring it here immediately. Chapter 58, People in a Hurry. Some people have mysterious self-confidence in certain aspects of themselves. Before doing things, they think in their hearts, I'm fine, I can do it, I'm very strong. Of course, Li also has it. His confidence lies in the fact that I can't get lost. People can't do it, don't blame the road for being uneven. There is a road ahead, and you are done. Molly, who was running, was undoubtedly lost again. Boom, boom, boom. There was an explosion sound not far ahead, and Li Qian was secretly happy, I found it. Molly, who had just arrived on the battlefield, did not see Kizaru, but saw a group of navies carrying guns and cannons, mercilessly bombarding several people. But it didn't help. Brother, how's the chrysanthemum? Molly asked the navy commanding next to him. The navy frowned angrily and turned his head. He wanted to reprimand him, but when he saw Li Qian wearing a formal suit and the cloak of justice, he knew that this person should be the colonel of the headquarters. Those people are big pirates, and our firepower can't cause harm to them. The navy in charge said anxiously. Li Mo stretched his neck and looked. A man with a long knife, a spotted fur hat on his head and a mustache on his chin was fiddling with a navy's head, but the navy didn't seem to be dead, and he could talk with the head left. Next to him was a polar bear who knew kung fu, a man as tall as a beast. In front of him stood a red-haired man in a red-haired cloak, with a dagger and a pistol pinned to his belly belt, with a ferocious face and goggles. Next to him stood a strange man with a helmet and two training knives. These people were calm under the bombardment of naval artillery fire, and they waved their hands to resist the guns and bullets. Li Mo looked back and asked, when I finish cleaning them up, take me to find Lao Sa and the others. As soon as the words fell, Li Qian flew towards those few people. The navy froze in place, looking behind Molly, who is Lao Sa. Eustace is in charge, goodbye in our new world. Luo Xie smiled and said to Kid. Kid grinned and looked at Luo, don't I? Just as Luo was about to say something, he saw Molly flying towards this side. Be careful. Boom. As soon as Luo's voice fell, Li Qian was already behind Kid. Without any nonsense, he pressed Kid's head from behind and smashed it to the ground. The change between the lightning and flint shocked everyone, but in an instant, when the pirates reacted, Kid had fallen into a pool of gravel. Kid! Kira screamed wildly, the scythe in both hands spun rapidly, and slashed towards Molly, who was still crouching beside him. Molly shook his head, his right arm was bent on his elbow, and pressed against Kira's abdomen. Wow tilde tilde. Kira took 2 steps back, spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell to her knees. The Kid pirates, 2 supernovas, were seriously injured and in a coma. You bastard! At the moment of the battle in front of him, Luo witnessed with his own eyes, Li Qian's combat power made him tremble in his heart. There is nothing special about Li Mo who defeated the 2, maybe the abilities of the 2 may be interesting, but now is not the time to play. Li Mo looked up at Luo. The moment Luo saw Moli's eyes, he knew that he couldn't defeat this man. Those eyes were indifferent and aloof, and he didn't put himself in his eyes. A drop of sweat dripped from Luo's forehead. Subconsciously took a step back. Room. Bang. Luo, who had not had time to use his abilities, was kicked away by Moli until he smashed the wall of a building. Captain. Bai Xiang and the tall man exclaimed when they looked at Luo, who was knocked into the air. The white bear hurried to find Luo, and the tall man threw his fist at Moli angrily. Moli turned his fist into a palm, caught the man's blow, pulled it to his front, and hit his knee. Ah! The man spewed blood and fell to the ground. Moli clapped his hands and exhaled a breath of smoke. Poorly, weak and vulnerable. The Navy, who were in a state of confusion at this time, finally reacted and looked at each other. Who is this man? How can it be so strong? Limo looked at the Navy, who were in a daze, frowned, and shouted, "Hey! You guys catch them! Look at the stumps all over the ground with severed heads, connect the parts to them. You, take me to find Lao Sa." Limo pointed to the Navy he commanded just now and said, "Oh, who is Lao Sa?" "Balusa Luno," Limo said. The Navy was stunned for a moment, then tried to ask Li Kie, General Pulsolino. "Yes, it's him." "Okay, I know where it is, it's not far ahead, I'll take you there." After the Navy finished speaking, he turned his head again and said to his subordinates, "They are all capable, and use Halustone handcuffs. Let's go, General. Where's the man?" The Navy froze in place. I turned my head for 2 seconds, and said something. "Are you gone?" Moli doesn't want to waste time now. This island will be his residence in the future. These grandsons are making trouble on their own territory, and they have not asked its future owner. So are Lao Sa and the others. They have nothing to do with infernal affairs. They can't kill if they are killed. Chambord Islands, 12 gr. All the crew members of the Straw Hat Pirates were injured and fled in all directions. As soon as Moli approached this battlefield, he heard Zon Taomaru shouting with a giant axe, "PX1, don't let them run away. Catch up." "Hey, Moli, you're here." Zon Daowan turned to see Moli. "Well, what's the situation?" Li Kie asked. Zon Taomaru pointed at Rayleigh, frowned and said, "Pluto." Rayleigh blocked the old man. "Pluto." Moli looked at Rayleigh with white hair and white beard, and thought to himself, "Isn't Pluto a battleship? How to become an old man? Oh tilde tilde, if he runs away, the Tianlong people will annoy the old man to death." Kizaru put his hands together between his belly, and a golden light was aroused between his hands. 8-foot mirror. The yellow light refracted many times in the air, chasing after Luffy, who was running away. Laugh. At this moment, Rayleigh swung out a double-edged long sword, dispelling the golden light of Kizaru. "I can't let you catch up with them." Rayleigh stood in front of Kizaru with his sword. Kizaru staggered and stood still. The look he looked at Raleigh, the underworld king, was a little more annoyed. "Pluto, Rayleigh." Rayleigh looked at Kizaru and grinned. "It's been a long time since I used a sword." The fists and palms of the yellow monkey collided, and the light formed a golden long sword. Tiankong Yunjian. Boom. Boom. 2 old men, a double-edged long sword and a lightsaber, slashed each other frantically. Moli quietly watched the 2 old guys play fencing. "What's the matter? You two are so afterimages." Here Zon Taomaru led the pacifists to pursue Luffy and the others. With the pursuit of the 2 war machines and Zon Taomaru, in Moli's opinion, he did not need to take action at all. Over there, bang bang bang. Boom. "Well, 2 people who are 100 years old together, why are you working so hard?" Limo also saw it. These 2 old guys didn't really fight at all. Seeing that there was a lot of movement, it was actually just 2 swords colliding with each other. Suddenly another pacifist appeared in the battlefield, but it was different. This pacifist was holding a book. Chapter 59. Bear's Paws Dial Kingbo. Why did Duke Shang appear here? Zon Taomaru looked at Tyrant Bear and said in surprise. Lee Kie narrowed his eyes, quietly watching the chaotic situation in the field. This group of pirates used their last will to escape, and the two old guys who were still slashing beside them, and now another character has appeared. Judging from the expressions of everyone in the field, the appearance of this person surprised them and made this group pirate fear. Bartholomew Bear stood in front of Zorro, slowly took off his gloves, and asked in a flat tone, "If you want to travel, where do you want to go?" Zorro gritted his teeth and looked at the powerful and strange man in front of him. The pain he had accumulated since he left the sea made him unable to move at this moment no matter how Usopp shouted. Bang! Zorro was in everyone's eyes, was shot flying, and disappeared from everyone's sight. Sauron! Everyone shouted, and Usopp, who was closest to Zorro and the bear, was sobbing and speechless. He reached out to hold Zorro's hand, and as he disappeared, he hung in the air. So, Zorro, he, disappeared. The PX-1, which was about to launch light waves to annihilate Usopp, Sanji, and Brook, was also slapped by the bear at this time. Brook was also shot flying in front of Sanji and Usopp. Huh, bear. Kizaru swung away Rayleigh with a sword and turned to look. Pirates, they are indeed pirates. Rayleigh didn't speak, he was also looking at the bear in the field, and at this time he didn't know what the bear who was in the Chihuahua position was going to do. Rayleigh was about to go to the rescue, but Kizaru would not let him go. He picked up his lightsaber and slashed at Rayleigh. Molly was watching in amazement as the big bear slapped people away. What kind of ability is this? Although he can also knock others into the air, it seems to be fundamentally different from the ability of this big bear. Molly, go and stop him. Huang Yuan said to Molly. Who? Bear, the man with the Bible. Molly pouted, stood up, and patted the dirt he was sitting on the ground just now. Boom! Usopp disappears. Sanji is desperately rushing towards the tyrant he cannot defeat. Bear turned his head to look at Sanji who was rushing over and raised his hand. Asshole! Sanji raised his legs high and kicked, and the bear's palm was approaching. In the nick of time. Molly appeared between the two of them, grabbed Sanji's leg with one hand and threw Sanji away. Scoff tilde tilde tilde. A punch hit the bear's palm, and there was no sound of the expected bombardment, and no one was hurt. The two fisted each other like this. A puff of white smoke rose from the meatball in the bear's palm. No fly. Big Sean and Molly had this idea in their hearts at the same time. What the big bear means is that Lee Kie was hit by his own fruit ability, why didn't he fly? Lee Mo's thought was, it shouldn't be. Everyone I've hammered will fly, why doesn't he move? And how are his hands fleshy? The two people were still, relatively silent, and the scene was a bit awkward for a while. Probably not enough power. The two thought at the same time. At the same time, at the moment of tacit agreement, a greater force slammed towards the opponent. Scoff tilde tilde tilde. There, the white smoke of the meatball on the palm is a little more than before. Molly raised his eyebrows. What's the situation? You've worked hard yourself. Bartholomew Shong, after being silent for a while, quickly gave up Lee Molly, this difficult person, squeezed the air with the air, and bounced himself to the side of the others in the Straw Hat Pirates. Frankie, disappear. Nami, disappear. Molly looked at the bear, frowned, his figure flashed, he appeared beside the bear, and he handed out a punch. Bang! Flesh Palm caught Molly's punch, with so much power that the banging bear took a step back. Seeing that he had caught it again, Molly hooked his mouth and was a little excited. No one had ever caught a punch or a knife from him, but he never expected that this person would be able to catch his own attack. What an interesting ability. As soon as he finished speaking, he kicked his legs at a high speed, but the bear didn't have time to pick it up with his other palm. Bang! The bear was kicked away by Molly, and the bear that flew out did not fall, but disappeared in midair. In Luffy's roar, Chopper and Robin flew away. Molly's expression changed slightly, and his eyes became cold. Hey, sir, aren't you a little contemptuous of people? Molly's burst of breath at this moment was clearly felt by Kizaru, Rayleigh and Shang in the field. The cold and pure killing intent swept the audience. Rayleigh, who was fighting Kyabu, shrank. Not good. This man will kill Luffy. Lei used his force to swing a sword, swayed Kyabu, and took a few steps back. His brows were slightly wrinkled, his eyes were firm, and a domineering coercion swept out, shocking everyone. One Piece's right wrist, Pluto, Rayleigh, is a domineering overlord. Huh. Molly turned his eyes slightly and looked at Rayleigh. At this moment, this battlefield, needless to say. He took off his saber and held it smoothly with his left hand. Molly swung the saber and slashed down. A half-moon arc of white light slashed, cutting through the warm air and attacking Rayleigh. Rayleigh looked solemnly at the slash that was slashing at him. The long sword trembled slightly, wrapped in a domineering look. Boom! The two giant swords collided, and a strong airflow erupted, quickly rolling number 12 GR, where the gust of wind passed, the turf flew. It was cancelled. For the first time, Molly's slash was blocked by another person's slash and cancelled. Okay, Uncle, your strength is very strong. Ha ha. Molly was excited after a long absence. He was actually blocked twice by two people today. It seems that people in this world still have strength. After laughing loudly, Li Kie rushed towards Rayleigh. Uncle, I'll play with you with my usual strength, don't let me down. Molly appeared in front of Rayleigh's left, holding the scabbard and slashing horizontally. Rayleigh's momentum soared, and the long sword wrapped in a domineering arrogance, slashing at Molly with all his strength. When the sound of swords colliding was like the sound of Hong Zhongjung. The daddy village under the two of them shattered inch by inch, and the slashes provoked by the blades shot in all directions. Rayleigh saw sweat on his forehead. This Navy is definitely a monster, how could he appear here? Ha, ha, ha. Rayleigh held his sword in both hands, panting heavily, staring at Molly intently. What's the matter, Uncle? When you were playing sword with the old man just now, weren't you lively? Molly asked. I am old, young man. When? Another blow. No swordplay, skill, flying slashes, sword collisions, rude and powerful. Molly was very happy. He didn't expect this uncle's strength to be able to catch the attack of his usual strength. It's just that he is old, and he is out of breath after just 3 swords. Molly put away the knife, looked at Rayleigh and said, Uncle, you can't do it, but it's not bad. You can take me 3 times. Rayleigh was stunned for a moment, then laughed, ha ha ha. What a terrible junior. And just when the two were slashing, the bear had already sent Sanji and Luffy away. The sudden change made the two temporarily stop their hands and look towards Bartholomew Bear. Kizaru looked at the bear curiously, pouted and said, yeah. What are you trying to do? Bartholomew Bear, this doesn't seem to be what you should do as Shichibukai. Shang slowly put on his gloves and said softly, I'm not affiliated with the Navy. Shang ignored the yellow monkey and walked forward on his own. Kasaragi gave Shang a sideways glance and made a long voice. Oh then have you figured out how to explain it to the top? This time, it's a big mess. The bear remained silent and went away. Huang Yuan's eyes flickered, and he turned his head to look at Molly. Molly, where is Pluto Rayleigh? Molly pointed behind him without turning his head. This is it. Oh. Molly looked at Huang Yuan's wretched appearance, wrinkled his face, and looked back. What the hell? What about the old man? Chapter 60. Excuses. Limo recalled the collapsed buildings, houses, and people who fled for shelter, and frowned slightly. Sanchin once said that in this sea, pirates are like Crucian carp crossing the river. Among the thousands of pirates, there are many true adventurers and explorers. But what puzzles Molly is that if you take risks, what do you do with the pirate flag? The freest man in the sea. Isn't that freedom going too far? The riot in Chambord is almost coming to an end, and some insignificant little pirates have their own headquarters to clean up. The supernovas also escaped the fate of death because of Drake's relationship. Lighting a cigar, Li Qian stood by the boat while biting his cigar, thinking about the two people who blocked his attack today. Not to mention the weird fleshy palm of the tall man, just say that the old man can block his 3 ordinary attacks. What is the power attached to the long sword? Is the armed color domineering? According to the domineering he has seen in the past, his arms and long sword should have turned black or blue, but he did not. Even if it is armed and domineering, it should not be able to block his own sword. Mo Li murmured, "It's really a strange power. Next time I encounter it, try it with a blade." "What are you thinking about?" Kizaru came over and asked. "It's nothing, just thinking about those two people," Mo Li said. "Pluto Rayleigh and Bartholomew Bear?" Kizaru asked. Li Mo nodded. "Old Saw, when I first joined the Navy, I just wanted to have a job and a place to stay, and didn't think too much about it." Huang Yuan nodded and didn't speak. When he first invited Mo Li to join the Navy, Mo Li had this mentality. Li Mo continued, "But now I don't think so." "Oh, why?" Kizaru asked suspiciously. Mo Li paused for a moment, exhaled a breath of smoke, and asked in doubt, "Lao Sa, what kind of world do you think this is?" Huang Yuan was stunned by Mo Li's mindless question, and tilted his head to look at Mo Li. "Mr. Mo Li, why are you suddenly asking this?" Li Mo shook his head and said softly, "I think this world is much more complicated than I imagined. Not only are there all kinds of strange abilities, but people's physical fitness is also much stronger than what they've seen before, and most importantly, they ignore life and have no respect for it." Quote, "I've seen quite a few pirates. Some call themselves adventurers, some are careerists, and some are simply robbers. They all have a slogan, freedom and ideals. Well, who knows? This isn't something we can change, isn't it?" Huang Yuan was obviously perfunctory with Mo Li, but seeing that Mo Li was looking at him, he paused and said, "Mr. Mo Li, I know there is great power, but that can only change yourself, not people's hearts." Actually, the old man was also confused. "Then what?" Li Qian asked curiously. Kizaru smiled, "And then he became an admiral." Mo Li pouted and asked again, "For the sake of an undercover agent, I let the other 10 people go. What do you think?" Huang Yuan seemed to have long known that Mo Li would ask him about this, and immediately said, "What do you think of their supernova strength?" Li Mo shrugged his shoulders, "Vulnerable." Kizaru nodded in agreement. "There are 4 people in the New World, called the 4 Emperors, who rule the world like an emperor in that sea area. We can destroy them, but if we start a war at the same time, the outcome is still unknown. And these people have a lot of secrets, and their organizations are intricate. We must understand it clearly. And, that man, is a pick, a rare devil fruit, a special upbringing that can make him easily join the core of it." Mo Li frowned and said displeased, "Ly, is this your playful fight with that old man, and the reason why you hinted that I should not kill those pirates? Just a whim after seeing Bartholomew Bear?" Boom, boom, tilde. As soon as Kizaru finished speaking, he heard a burst of artillery bombardment, and then the alarm sounded. "Report to Admiral Kizaru. A pirate ship appeared in the direction of the left cord and was bombarding us." A navy on the deck shouted. Huang Yuan was stunned and looked at Mo Li. Li Qian shrugged and walked over. At first glance, Mo Li was delighted. "What a broken ship, it seems that they have gone through hardships to get here. What kind of pirate is that? How dare you be so brave?" Mo Li pointed to the pirate ship and asked. "Sir, it seems that the surprise pirates have just arrived at Chambord and haven't landed yet, probably. The Navy saluted first, and then hesitantly said, "Probably what?" The Navy swallowed and said, "Probably the ship is badly damaged, like robbing a warship." "Ha ha," Mo Li sneered silently. He took out the Navy's standard saber, and said softly, "You look good, I'll teach you a trick." Mo Li raised his saber, pointed the tip of the knife at the pirate ship that was still firing, and stabbed. The long knife stimulated the spiral cone slash, passed through the sea, rolled up the sea water, and rushed towards the pirate ship like a water dragon. The spiral slash pierced into the pirate ship's bow, shattering the already tattered pirate ship. Alert lifted. Limo turned around and put the general knife back into the Navy's scabbard, and patted the Navy's shoulder. Study hard, practice hard. The Navy stared blankly at the wreckage and the pirates struggling in the water in the distance, and swallowed hard. I should never learn it in my life. Colonel Molee, here we are, I'll go first. At the door of Molee's house, a Navy gave a military salute to Molee. Molee said blankly, thank you. Pushing the door into the courtyard, the first thing I saw was Kumik squatting on the edge of the fish pond, and there was another big carp jumping around in the fish pond. Li Kie raised his eyebrows, walked over, no nonsense, and copied it with one hand. Jimmy, add vegetables. Kumik. That night. There are 3 lounge chairs and a small bamboo pier in the small courtyard. Kumik sat obediently on the small bamboo pier, propped up his arms on his knees, held his face in the shape of a flower with his little hands, and looked curiously at the 3 people on the reclining chair looking up at the starry sky. During the day, the Marin Vatican was loud and frightening, but at night it was quiet, with searchlights shining on the starry sky from time to time. According to Mr. Kizaru, there was no such thing in the first place. Since the Golden Lion came once, Malin Fando has had a novelty such as aeronautical searchlight. The romance of the stars and rivers is all a matter of poets. Can ordinary people understand it? Anyway, Molee couldn't understand, so he yawned lazily, wiped the corners of his eyes, and Molee said, Old Saw said, Marin Fando is going to fight, you 2 take Xiaoduding and Benben with you. Take refuge, fight the battle, and come back. Hearing this, Jimmy turned his head to look at Molee, his red lips painted with bright lipstick lightly opened. Let's stay and help you. Molee shook his head. Jimmy looked at Sanchin anxiously. She knew that it would take 3,000 to persuade Molee to change his mind. Sanchin looked at Jimmy, bit his lower lip, and said softly, when are you going? Tomorrow. Leaving a sentence, Limo got up and went back to sleep. Jimmy frowned and looked at Sanchian displeased ly. Sanchin looked at the stars in the sky, as if to say to himself, or to Jimmy. War, it's hard for us to protect ourselves, so don't make trouble for a man. Instead of embarrassing him at this time, it's better to train yourself more, strengthen your strength, and wait silently until the day he needs it.